Welcome back. What you're about to hear aren't just stories, they're memories, echoing through the fog of war. Before we begin, like the video, subscribe and tell me where are you from and what time are you watching. Now, get comfortable. The rain is already falling, and the stories are on their way. Captain Alexander Kovalenko, 32 years old, 3rd Special Purpose Regiment, Special Operations Forces SSO, born in Poltava, Ukraine. The Russian BTR has no idea it's about to die. Through my tablet screen, I watch it lumbering along, the tree line, a steel beast thinking itself hidden among sparse trees stripped bare by artillery. My fingers hover over the touchscreen controller, making micro adjustments to the FPV drone's flight path. Less than 1 kilometer away, I sit in the darkness of an abandoned farmhouse, but my consciousness exists in that drone, a digital predator hunting 500 meters above the Donbas steppe. Wind from the northeast, 8 meters per second. Yuri murmurs beside me, monitoring weather conditions on his own tablet. Compensate 2 degrees. I make the adjustment, centering the crosshairs on the BTR's thinner top armor. The 3-kilogram-shaped charge beneath the drone will punch through it like paper. The drone's camera shows 4 Russian soldiers walking alongside their vehicle, smoking, weapons slung carelessly. They still don't understand this new kind of war, where death comes silent from the sky, delivered by operators they'll never see. Altitude 470 and holding, I report, voice steady despite the adrenaline. Target locked, beginning terminal approach. I push the control stick forward, and the drone descends in a controlled dive. On screen, the BTR grows larger, unaware of the technological doom spiraling toward it. I feel nothing personal. Toward these men about to die, no hatred, no remorse. This is electromagnetic warfare, clinical and distant. The Russians remain oblivious even as the drone enters its final approach, the tablet showing their cigarette embers glowing in the twilight. Impact in 3, 2. My journey into the digital battlefield began 8 years before this moment. Before the full-scale invasion, I had served in the original operations against Russian forces in 2014-2015, witnessing the birth of drone warfare in its crudest form. Back then, we modified commercial DJI quadcopters with primitive release mechanisms, dropping hand grenades with 3D printed fins. Both sides were amateurs stumbling through the opening chapters of a technological revolution in warfare. But February 24, 2022, changed everything. The full Russian invasion accelerated warfare's evolution by decades in a matter of months. I was already in the Special Operations Forces by then, commanding a reconnaissance team in the Kharkiv sector. We had better drones, better training, but nothing compared to what would develop as the war expanded. "Welcome to the future of warfare," Colonel Dmitro had said during our briefing at the underground command post outside Sloviansk. "Gentlemen, forget most of what you think you know about combat operations. We're establishing the first dedicated SSO drone strike unit. You'll be our digital hunters." The assembled operators, 12 men and 2 women, all veterans of special operations, looked skeptical. We had been trained for direct action missions, hostage rescue, reconnaissance, not flying robots via tablet screens. Colonel Dmitro seemed to read our thoughts. "The Russians have 5 times our manpower, twice our armor. But we have one critical advantage: adaptability. While they fight with Soviet doctrines from the 1980s, we're creating warfare of the 2030s. In the months that followed, our skepticism evaporated as we witnessed the drone revolution firsthand. Our unit became pioneers in what military theorists would later call democratized precision strike capability. Commercial technology, modified by civilian Ukrainian engineers, transformed into weapons that could challenge a nuclear superpower. Our base of operations became a bizarre hybrid of military outpost and tech startup. One room contained traditional weapons, rifles, pistols, explosives, while the adjacent space housed soldering stations, 3D printers, and testing rigs. Civilian IT specialists worked alongside combat veterans, creating systems that had never existed before. The learning curve was steep and unforgiving. Each mission taught brutal lessons. We lost drones to electronic warfare, weather conditions, Mechanical failures and occasionally our own errors, but we learned, adapted, improved, faster than the Russians could counter. It's not just about the technology, Yuri had explained during one late-night modification session. A former software developer who'd volunteered in 2022, he'd become our unit's technical genius. It's about integrating systems in ways they can't predict. Their military procurement takes years. We update our systems weekly. My first drone strike had come 4 months after joining the unit. A Russian T-72 tank damaged by artillery but still operational, its crew attempting repairs under a camouflage net. I remember the strange disconnect, my physical body safe, in a cellar 10 kilometers away while my consciousness hovered above the target through the drone's camera. The shaped charge had functioned perfectly, detonating against the engine compartment. The explosion looked almost small on the tablet screen, nothing like Hollywood depictions. But the tank burned intensely afterward, ammunition cooking off in secondary explosions that launched the turret skyward in a macabre spectacle. "Congratulations," Yuri had said simply. "You just saved lives. Our infantry won't have to face that tank tomorrow." That became our unit's mantra. Technology protecting Ukrainian lives by eliminating threats from safe distance. We weren't traditional warriors, but technological predators, hunting from the digital dimension while our bodies remained hidden far from danger. Over the following year, our capabilities expanded dramatically. Improved batteries extended. Range, better cameras provided clearer images. More powerful transmitters defeated Russian jamming systems. Artificial intelligence helped identify targets. Ukrainian tech companies rapidly converted commercial innovations into military applications. And now, 18 months into the full-scale war, I found myself directing an operation that would have seemed like science fiction when the conflict began. "Target acquisition confirmed," reports Maxim from his position 2 kilometers south. As our third team member, he controls a separate reconnaissance drone maintaining overwatch of our operational area. No additional enemy forces detected within support range of the target. I nod, refocusing on the attack drone's final approach. The FPV model we're using is our newest design. Carbon fiber frame, digital signal transmission, thermal imaging overlay, and a shaped charge powerful enough to destroy any Russian vehicle short of a main battle tank. The BTR fills my screen, now growing larger with each passing second. 500 meters, 400, 300. The Russians still haven't detected the nearly silent electric drone diving toward them. At 200 meters, I make final trajectory adjustments, ensuring optimal impact angle against the vehicle's vulnerable top armor. Weapon-armed, I confirm, pressing the safety override on my controller. The red indicator light confirms the detonator is now active. Terminal guidance engaged. The last 100 meters pass in slow motion, my perception altered by adrenaline and intense focus. I can see individual Russian soldiers now, one leaning against the BTR's hull, another scanning the horizon with binoculars, but looking horizontal, not up where the true threat approaches. Impact comes with anticlimactic simplicity. The screen flashes white as the shaped charge detonates, then goes black as the drone disintegrates. I switch immediately to Maxim's reconnaissance feed, which shows the BTR engulfed in flames, ammunition cooking off inside. The soldiers who had been alongside it lie motionless on the ground, victims of a warfare they couldn't see or hear coming. Confirmed kill, Maxim reports clinically. BTR fully neutralized. All personnel neutralized. No survivors attempting to withdraw. I exhale slowly, feeling the strange emotional detachment that accompanies these operations. Is this still combat when I've killed 4 men without personal risk? Without seeing their faces except as digital images on a screen? The philosophical question has no easy answer, but the tactical result is undeniable. One less Russian armored vehicle threatening Ukrainian positions. Begin Phase 2, I order, already preparing the second drone for launch. Maxim, maintain. Overwatch, Yuri, load targeting coordinates for the command post. Our intelligence had identified a Russian field headquarters in a farmhouse 3 kilometers from the destroyed BTR. The burning vehicle would now serve as a distraction, drawing attention and resources away from the true high-value target. When ready, Yuri confirms, having prepared another FPV drone equipped with a larger explosive payload. Wind conditions remain favorable. I initiate the launch sequence, watching as the second drone rises silently into the darkening sky. Night operations provide optimal conditions. Our thermal imaging remains effective, while Russian visual observation capabilities degrade. Their night vision equipment is generally inferior and less widely distributed among regular units. Drone 2 airborne and stable, I report, as the aircraft reaches operational altitude. Beginning transit to target. Estimated time to target, zone 8 minutes. The digital display shows a green flight path overlay against the thermal imaging background. The landscape below appears as variations of gray and black, with occasional heat signatures marking vehicles, generators, or personnel. The Russian command post appears as a cluster of heat blooms approximately 2.5 kilometers ahead. During transit, I activate the secure communication system to update our battalion headquarters. Phoenix Actual, this is Falcon Leader. Phase 1 complete, BTR destroyed. Proceeding with Phase 2 targeting command element. Request artillery standby for Phase 3. Falcon Leader, Phoenix Actual acknowledges. Comes the encrypted response. Artillery is prepared for Phase 3 following your target confirmation. Be advised, signals intelligence indicates increased electronic warfare activity in your sector. Understood, I reply, glancing at Yuri, who nods and begins adjusting our electronic countermeasures. Russian jamming capabilities have improved over months of combat, necessitating constant adaptation of our systems. Implementing frequency hopping protocol, Yuri reports, fingers dancing across his specialized keyboard. Adding signal noise distortion to mask drone signature. They're scanning but not directed at us specifically yet. This technological cat-and-mouse game defines modern warfare. Invisible electromagnetic battles occurring simultaneously with physical destruction. The Russians deploy sophisticated jamming systems. We counter with frequency agility. They use directional finding equipment. We minimize transmission duration and add decoy signals. Each side constantly evolves, creating and breaking advantages in the electromagnetic spectrum. 2 minutes to target, I announce as the drone approaches the Russian headquarters. The thermal imaging shows approximately 15 heat signatures inside the structure, with 2 military vehicles parked outside and 4 sentries positioned around the perimeter. Falcon Leader, be advised. Maxim interrupts, voice tense. Detecting airborne radar activation. Possible Russian counter-drone unit active in sector. This complicates our operation. Russian counter-drone units use specialized equipment to detect and neutralize Ukrainian unmanned systems. Their radar can locate our drones while electronic warfare systems attempt to sever our control links. Understood, I acknowledge. Already implementing countermeasures. Reducing altitude to 30 meters. Activating radar absorbent coating. Switching to passive approach profile. The drone descends rapidly, using terrain features for concealment. Modern FPV drones incorporate multiple stealth features. Radar absorbent materials. Minimized electronic emissions. Sound suppression. Systems. At lower altitude, the drone can exploit ground clutter to mask its approach, though this increases risk of collision with obstacles. 1 minute to target, I report, intense concentration evident in my voice. Maintaining stealth profile, no indication of detection yet. The target building grows larger on my display as the drone approaches from the eastern side where fewer sentries are positioned. I can now distinguish individual heat signatures. Officers gathered around what appears to be a map table, radio operators at communication stations, sentries patrolling the perimeter. Optimal impact point identified, Yuri confirms, highlighting a section of the building on my screen. Structure analysis suggests load-bearing wall, detonation. There should cause partial collapse of the eastern wing. I adjust the drone's approach vector accordingly, aiming for maximum structural damage rather than personnel elimination. Destroying their command and communications capabilities is more valuable than killing individual officers who can be replaced. 30 seconds to target, I announce. No indication of detection. Weapon armed, terminal guidance active. The final approach proceeds with precision born from months of similar operations. The drone maintains minimal altitude, using a small drainage ditch for concealment until the last possible moment. At 15 meters from target, I execute a sharp vertical climb to position the explosive payload against the building's wall at the identified structural weakness. Impact and detonation occur simultaneously. The screen flashes white then, black as the drone is destroyed in the explosion. I immediately switch to Maxim's Overwatch feed, observing the devastation with clinical detachment. Direct hit on target, Maxim confirms. Eastern section of structure collapsing. Significant casualties observed. Surviving personnel evacuating in disarray. The thermal feed shows chaos. Heat signatures moving erratically as survivors flee the partially collapsed building. Some remain motionless under debris. Others attempt to establish security perimeter or render aid to wounded comrades. Their organized command structure has been shattered in seconds by an attack they never saw coming. Phase 2 complete, I report to headquarters. Russian command post neutralized. Multiple casualties confirmed. Requesting Phase 3 initiation. Falcon leader Phoenix Actual acknowledges, comes the response. Artillery commencing. Fire mission in 30 seconds. Recommend immediate extraction from your position. As if to emphasize the warning, Yuri's electronic warfare detector begins pulsing urgently. Multiple radio direction finding systems activating, he reports tensely. Russians are triangulating our transmission location. We need to move. This is the persistent vulnerability in drone warfare. While the aircraft operate at safe distance, the control signals can be traced to their source given sufficient time and equipment. We never remain in one location longer than necessary after a strike. Initiating extraction, I confirm. Already disconnecting our equipment, while Maxim collapses his observation post. Years of practice have honed our pack-up procedure to under 2 minutes. Batteries disconnected, antennas collapsed, controllers secured, all evidence of our presence eliminated. In the distance, the distinctive whistle of outgoing artillery announces Phase 3, Ukrainian 152mm shells, targeting the disorganized Russian forces around the destroyed command post. The precision is impressive. The first impacts arrive just as we're loading our equipment into our nondescript civilian vehicle. Extraction complete, I report as we pull away from the abandoned farmhouse. Behind us, the artillery continues. Methodically, the flashes briefly illuminating the horizon. Returning to forward base. Mission accomplished. Hours later, back at our concealed operations center, we review the mission data, while technicians prepare replacement drones. For future operations, the after-action imagery confirms complete destruction of both the BTR and command post, with estimated Russian casualties between 15 and 20 personnel. Good hunting, Colonel Dimitro comments during our debrief, reviewing the thermal footage. The destruction of that command element will disrupt their operations across the entire sector for at least 72 hours. I nod acknowledgement, feeling the familiar post-mission emotional flatness. The technological distance of drone warfare creates a strange psychological space. The objective knowledge of having killed multiple people without the visceral experience of traditional combat. Some operators find this dissociation troubling. Others consider it a blessing. Their counter-drone capabilities are improving, I note, highlighting the radar activation detected during our approach. Each operation becomes progressively more complex as they adapt. And we adapt faster, Colonel Dimitro responds confidently. Tomorrow you'll test the new wide-spectrum jamming package from our IT volunteers. The electromagnetic battlefield evolves daily. Later, in the rare privacy of my small quarters, I review personal mission notes while our next operation plans take shape. This technological war has transformed me from Special Forces operator to something not yet fully defined by military doctrine. Part programmer, part pilot, part hunter, existing simultaneously in physical space and the digital domain. My tablet chimes with a notification, new intelligence from headquarters identifying priority targets for tomorrow's operations. The ceaseless rhythm of this digital battlefield continues without regard for human limitations. Another Russian convoy, detected moving toward the front. Another command post identified through signals intelligence. Another day of invisible hunting through tablet screens and thermal signatures. I prepare my equipment methodically, checking batteries, controllers, communication systems. The Russians still haven't fully adapted to this new reality where commercial technology modified by civilian engineers and deployed by special forces operators, can challenge the military might of a nuclear superpower. Their doctrinal rigidity remains our greatest advantage in this strange new warfare, defined by silicon chips and electromagnetic spectrum, rather than physical bravery or superior numbers. Tomorrow we'll launch our digital predators again, hunting, through tablet screens and thermal imaging. Invisible, patient, lethal, the ghost pilots of Ukraine's technological resistance. Senior Lieutenant Maxim Boyko, 28 years old, 12th Special Purpose Brigade, Azov Regiment, born in Mariupol, Ukraine. The artillery shell explodes 10 meters from our forward trench, showering us with frozen earth and shrapnel. I press my body against the mud wall, feeling each impact through my boots as the ground trembles. Through narrow periscope slits, I watch the wasteland between our lines and the Russians, a hellscape reminiscent of the Somme or Verdun, yet populated with 21st century killers. Surveillance drones hover overhead like mechanical vultures. Quadcopters deliver grenades with precision World War I generals could never imagine. Electronic warfare systems battle invisibly across the electromagnetic spectrum. "Incoming!" shouts Sergeant Petro over the network. Quadcopters, approaching from bearing 270, everyone down! I duck beneath the overhead cover as the distinctive buzz of Russian FPV drones grows louder. The sound has become the signature terror of this strange hybrid war, part medieval siege, part digital assassination. The noise passes directly, overhead followed by explosions further down our trench system. Someone screams, a sound as ancient as warfare itself. Counter-battery tracking activated, reports our drone operator from the underground command post. Artillery request submitted, fire mission approved. Within 30 seconds, Ukrainian 155mm shells scream overhead toward the Russian positions. The response is immediate, not random terror, but precision guided by real-time battlefield data. GPS coordinates transmitted from reconnaissance drones, firing solutions calculated by AI algorithms, modern technology delivering ancient violence. My radio crackles with targeting updates as I check the electronic tablet mounted to my chest rig. The display shows friendly positions, suspected enemy locations, and the constant digital heartbeat of a war fought simultaneously in trenches and cyberspace. A notification appears, satellite imagery showing Russian armor massing 3 kilometers behind their front line. All units, prepare for possible assault, I instruct over the encrypted network. Forward observers report BTR movement behind Russian lines. Electronic warfare team, initiate counter-drone measures now. The strange duality of this war never ceases to unsettle me. We live like our great-grandfathers, in muddy trenches, surrounded by rats, fighting for meters of blasted earth. Yet we kill with technologies they could never have imagined, extending human capacity for destruction across multiple dimensions. And still, despite all advancement, warfare remains what it has always been. Blood and soil, terror and courage, the struggle to survive until nightfall. My journey to these frozen trenches northeast of Bakhmut began long before the full-scale invasion. I had joined the Azov Regiment in 2015, during the first phase of Russian aggression in eastern Ukraine. Back then, we were a volunteer battalion fighting with limited resources and training against Russian proxy forces in Donbas. Kharkiv, regimental commander, had been straightforward during my induction. "Forget the Hollywood version of warfare," he said to the assembled volunteers. "This conflict will be dirty, miserable, and unglamorous. Many of you will die for a few hundred meters of contested ground that nobody would want in peacetime." He had been right. Those early years established the fundamental character of this war: positional fighting across hardened front lines, artillery duels, and small unit actions. A preview of what would come when Russia launched its full invasion in February 2022. The first weeks after the invasion were chaos, rapid movement, shifting front lines, desperate defenses. But as Ukrainian forces halted the Russian advance, the conflict gradually hardened into something that would have been recognizable to soldiers from 1916. trench systems extending hundreds of kilometers, artillery bombardments, and the grinding war of attrition that transforms men into statistics. My unit had been deployed to the Bakhmut sector in October 2022 as Russian forces, including Wagner mercenaries, began their push to capture the city. Our mission was to hold defensive positions in the northeastern approaches, preventing encirclement. You'll be reinforcing existing trenches and fortifying new positions, our battalion commander explained during the deployment briefing. The Russians are massing forces for a major push. They'll accept massive casualties to advance even a few hundred meters. What followed was a masterclass in the strange evolution of warfare. How modern technology can be grafted onto ancient, tactical problems. We improved the existing Soviet-era trenches with modern materials and designs, complex networks of fighting positions, communication trenches, and underground bunkers. Multiple layers of obstacles, anti-tank ditches, wire entanglements, and minefields. All standard defensive measures that would have been familiar to any soldier from the past century, yet integrated into this traditional framework were elements from a different technological era. Distributed sensor networks detected enemy movement using seismic and acoustic signatures. Wireless communication nodes maintained connectivity despite Russian jamming efforts. Solar panels and battery systems powered electronic equipment. Thermal cameras monitored no man's land during darkness. Commercial drones provided continuous overhead surveillance. This is the future of warfare, explained our battalion electronic warfare specialist, a former IT professional who'd volunteered in 2022. Not robots fighting each other in some science fiction scenario, but traditional combat augmented by technology. The side that best integrates these elements wins. The Russians learned this lesson slowly and painfully. Their initial human wave tactics, sending poorly trained mobilized troops against prepared positions, resulted in catastrophic casualties. Yet they adapted, incorporating their own technological elements while maintaining the fundamental brutality of attritional warfare. By January 2023, our sector had stabilized into a horrific routine. Daily artillery duels, drone dropped, munitions targeting trenches and observation posts, small unit probing actions to identify weaknesses, electronic warfare systems battling for control of the electromagnetic spectrum, and beneath it all, the constant misery of trench life, cold, mud, disease, and the psychological strain of waiting for the next attack. The Russian assault begins at dawn, following their typical pattern. First comes the artillery preparation, a mixture of conventional 152mm shells and guided munitions pounding our forward positions. Counter-battery radars immediately detect their firing positions, transmitting coordinates to Ukrainian artillery units that respond within minutes. "Incoming," shouts our forward observer. Multiple armored vehicles advancing under smoke cover, approximately 800 meters and closing. I activate our defensive protocol, triggering alerts across our integrated command network. Within seconds, every fighter in our section knows their assigned role. Drone operators launch reconnaissance, platforms to track enemy movement. Anti-tank teams ready, javelin missiles at designated firing positions. Machine gunners prepare interlocking fields of fire covering likely approach routes. Electronic warfare detecting increased drone activity, reports our EW specialist. Russians are attempting to jam our communications on primary frequencies. Switch to alternate channels, I order, adjusting my own radio accordingly. Maintain drone countermeasures. Deploy decoys to distract their targeting systems. The technological battle unfolds parallel to the physical one. Invisible electronic warfare systems attacking and defending across the spectrum. Russian jamming equipment attempting to disable our communications and drone operations. Our countermeasures creating false signals to confuse their targeting systems. Both sides deploying digital decoys to draw fire away from actual positions. Through my periscope, I observe Russian BTR-82s advancing through artificial smoke cover. Infantry squads moving alongside using the vehicles for protection. The scene could be from any war of the past century, except for the quadcopters hovering above the battlefield, directing artillery fire with unprecedented precision. All units, engage at will when targets enter effective range, I command, over the network. Priority targets are command vehicles and any electronic warfare platforms. Our first response comes from concealed anti-tank positions. A Javelin missile streaks toward the lead BTR, impacting with devastating effect. The thermal warhead penetrates the top armor, igniting ammunition inside. Secondary explosions throw the turret skyward as Russian infantry scatter for cover. Good. Effect on target, reports the missile team. Shifting to secondary target, Ukrainian artillery joins the defense, guided by real-time drone footage. The 155mm shells land with precision among the advancing Russians, creating chaos in their formation. More vehicles burn, more infantry fall, yet they continue advancing through their own dead, following orders that prioritize progress over survival. They're sending kamikaze drones against our anti-tank positions, calls Sergeant Petro urgently. Electronic countermeasures failing to defeat guidance systems. These FPV suicide drones represent the newest Russian adaptation, commercial. Quadcopters modified with explosive warheads, piloted via first-person video by operators in protected positions. They maneuver with terrifying agility, seeking targets designated by surveillance drones. Deploying anti-drone defenses, responds our electronic warfare team, activating short-range jammers and directed energy systems. Another layer of modern technology integrated into traditional defense, portable jamming devices that disrupt drone control signals, microwave emitters that overheat electronic components, even shotgun-like systems firing specialized ammunition designed to bring down small drones. The battle intensifies as Russian forces reach our outer defensive belt. Infantry pour into gaps created by their artillery, attempting to breach our minefields under covering fire from vehicle-mounted heavy machine guns. I direct our response from the command position, coordinating across multiple communication channels while monitoring the tactical display on my tablet. First platoon, shift fire right to cover the approach through the destroyed building, I order. Drone section, maintain overhead coverage of Sector 2. Artillery liaison, request. Fire mission on these coordinates. Despite the electronic wizardry, much of the fighting remains brutally primitive. Russian soldiers charge forward with fixed bayonets when ammunition runs low. Hand grenades are exchanged at close range. Wounded men are dragged through mud to aid stations in rear trenches. The screams of the dying resonate across both sides' communications networks. Counter-assault team, prepare to move, I command, as Russians breach our outer perimeter in one sector. Third squad, provide covering fire. Drone operators, mark targets for precision engagement. Our mobile reserve, a squad of fighters specially equipped for close combat, deploys from protected positions behind the main line. They carry modern weapons with advanced optics, body armor with integrated communications, and tactical tablets showing real-time battlefield information. Yet they advance using fire and movement techniques that would be immediately recognizable to soldiers from any era. The decisive moment comes when a Russian electronic warfare vehicle moves forward to support their breaching element. Its distinctive antenna array identifies it as a Krasuka 4 system, capable of jamming our communications across a wide area. If it establishes position, our integrated defense will fragment into isolated pockets. Priority target identified, I announce across all channels. Electronic warfare vehicle at grid 147259. All available assets engage immediately. The response demonstrates the full integration of modern and traditional warfare. An FPV drone operated from our rear area accelerates toward the vehicle, camera showing the operator's first-person view as it closes distance. A Javelin team repositions for a shot if the drone attack fails. Artillery adjusts targeting solutions based on coordinates transmitted from our reconnaissance platforms. The drone operator succeeds brilliantly, navigating through Russian countermeasures to impact directly on the EW vehicle's sensitive equipment. The explosion isn't large, but it's precisely targeted to destroy irreplaceable electronic components. Smoke billows from the vehicle as its crew abandons the suddenly vulnerable position. Target neutralized, confirms our drone section. Russian electronic warfare capabilities degraded in sector. Without their jamming support, the Russian attack loses coordination. Our full communications network returns to operation, allowing precise direction of artillery and reserves. The momentum shifts as Ukrainian counterattacks isolate and eliminate the Russian breaching elements. By mid-afternoon, the assault collapses entirely. Russian forces withdraw to their starting positions, leaving their dead and damaged vehicles in no man's land. Drone footage shows at least 6 destroyed armored vehicles and dozens of casualties, for a gain of 0 territory. All units, maintain vigilance, I instruct as the firing diminishes. They'll likely employ artillery to cover their withdrawal. Electronic warfare team, scan for drone activity. Medical section, prepare for casualty extraction. The cost of our successful defense becomes apparent as reports filter in. 3 killed, 11 wounded in our company alone. Among the dead is Sergeant Petro, whose early warning about Russian drones likely saved many lives. The familiar hollowness settles in my chest as I record his name in the casualty report. Another friend lost defending a few hundred meters of worthless, blasted earth. As darkness falls, the battlefield transforms again. Thermal imaging systems activate, revealing heat signatures across the contested ground. Night vision equipment turns darkness to ghostly green daylight. Counter-battery radars maintain vigilance against Russian artillery. The technological elements of modern warfare continue unabated, while exhausted soldiers rotate through watch positions. In our underground command post, a concrete bunker reinforced with steel I-beams and equipped with electricity, communications, systems and air filtration. I conduct the post-action debrief with platoon leaders. The tactical display shows our positions, confirmed enemy locations, and suspected Russian assembly areas for tomorrow's inevitable assault. They'll adjust their approach, notes Lieutenant Kozak, our intelligence officer. Probably shift the main effort west toward the forested sector where their vehicles have better concealment. Expect increased electronic warfare activity after today's losses. I nod agreement, already planning defensive adjustments. We'll reinforce the western approach tonight, reposition anti-tank teams and reallocate drone assets. Coordinate, too, with adjacent units to ensure interlocking fields of fire. The discussion continues. Detailed analysis of Russian tactics, assessment of our own vulnerabilities, allocation of limited resources across a complex battlefield. The language combines ancient military concepts with modern technological terminology. Fields of fire and enfilade positions discussed alongside electronic spectrum management and counter-drone measures. Generals from any era would recognize the tactical problems, even if the technological solutions would bewilder them. After the meeting, I visit the aid station where our medics treat the wounded. Modern battlefield medicine represents another, stark contrast with historical trench warfare. Combat application tourniquets control hemorrhaging. Hemostatic gauze seals wounds that would have been fatal in previous conflicts. Wireless monitoring systems track vital signs, yet the wounds themselves remain brutally timeless. Shrapnel lacerations, blast injuries, bullet wounds. How are they? I ask our chief medic, a former emergency room doctor who volunteered after the full invasion. 3 critical but stable, she replies, exhaustion evident in her voice. Preparing them for evacuation to the field hospital. The others should return to duty within days. I speak briefly with each wounded fighter, offering encouragement while inwardly calculating how their absence will affect our defensive capacity. The mathematics of attrition warfare. How many losses we can sustain while maintaining combat. Effectiveness. How quickly replacements can be trained and integrated into our unit. The same calculations made by commanders throughout military history. Later, alone in my small dugout off the command bunker, I review the day's events on my tablet. The screen's blue glow illuminates the confined space as I analyze drone footage, update casualty reports, and prepare recommendations for tomorrow's operations. The device contains technical capabilities beyond anything imagined in previous trench warfare. Satellite imagery, encrypted communications, artificial intelligence assessment tools. Yet the fundamental questions remain unchanged. How to hold ground, how to manage casualties, how to maintain morale through endless artillery bombardment. I send a brief message to battalion headquarters confirming our status and requirements, ammunition resupply, replacement personnel, spare electronic equipment. Then I check our electronic early warning network one final time before allowing myself 3 hours of sleep. The system monitors acoustic, seismic, and electromagnetic signatures across our sector, alerting us to any significant enemy movement. As I remove my body armor and prepare my sleeping bag, the bizarre contradictions of this war settle around me like the omnipresent mud. We fight in trenches like our ancestors, enduring conditions barely changed in a century. Yet we kill with technologies that transform warfare's fundamental character. Surveillance platforms that eliminate battlefield uncertainty. Precision weapons that strike with unprecedented accuracy. Information systems that process battlefield data in real time. This strange hybrid conflict, ancient in its brutality yet futuristic in its execution, has become Ukraine's reality. We have adapted faster than our enemies, integrating civilian technology into military applications with unprecedented speed. Yet the cost remains measured in blood and destroyed lives. In friends like Sergeant Petro, who will never return home. In civilians whose existence has been shattered by Russian aggression. Tomorrow will bring another assault, another defense, another calculation of ground gained or lost measured in meters. The cycle continues day after day in this strange war where past and future collide in muddy trenches across eastern Ukraine, where soldiers monitor electronic tablets while huddling in dugouts reminiscent of Passchendaele, where trenches from 1944 are repurposed for warfare in 2023, where technology changes the character of conflict without altering its fundamental nature. I close my eyes as artillery rumbles in the distance, the ancient voice of war speaking through modern weapons. In 3 hours, I'll wake to continue this strange battle where World War I tactics meet 21st century technology, where we defend Ukraine 1 meter at a time, using every tool from entrenchment tools to satellite imagery. The digital trenches of a war unlike any in history, yet fundamentally unchanged in its horror. Staff Sergeant Samuel Wilson, 35 years old, Medical Section, 2nd Battalion, International Legion for the Defense of Ukraine, born in Manchester, England. The blood won't come off my hands. It never truly does. No matter how hard I scrub with surgical soap, how hot the water runs until my skin turns angry red, how many times I repeat the procedure, the blood remains. Sometimes visible, sometimes invisible, but always there. The evidence of my futile work in this meat grinder they call Eastern Ukraine. Wilson, incoming casualties 5 minutes out, shouts Lieutenant Kovac through the medical station door. I dry my hands on a relatively clean towel. Nature of injuries? I ask, already knowing the answer. Artillery. 3 critical, 2 walking wounded. The same story, different day. Different bodies, same wounds. I grab my trauma kit and head to the reception area, a repurposed school gymnasium in a village 20 kilometers from the Bakhmut front. The floor is stained with blood that our orderlies can never fully remove, no matter how much bleach they use. The parallels to my own hands don't escape me. The medical station erupts into controlled chaos as the casualties arrive in 2 mud-covered ambulances. Ukrainian territorial defense soldiers, civilian volunteers who were teachers and shopkeepers before Russian artillery transformed them into statistics. Our team moves with choreographed precision, the result of too much practice with too many broken bodies. Traumatic amputation, left leg below knee, tourniquet applied, calls Sergeant Jacobson, a Norwegian former paramedic, as he transfers the first stretcher. Massive blood loss, pressure dropping, needs immediate vascular intervention. The casualty, barely 20 with the wispy beginnings of a mustache, stares through me with the vacant look I've seen hundreds of times. The 1,000-meter gaze of someone viewing their own mortality from a previously unimaginable perspective. I insert an IV line with practiced efficiency, hooking up blood products and pushing TXA to control hemorrhage. My hands move automatically, while my mind drifts. Another young man who will return home forever changed, assuming he survives the next hour. You're doing good, mate, I tell him in English, forgetting momentarily that he likely doesn't understand. It doesn't matter. The tone transcends language. The universal reassurance of medical professionals who've seen too much and promise too little. When I joined the International Legion 13 months ago, I believed the idealistic recruitment messaging. I would use my skills as a former British Army combat medic to save Ukrainian defenders fighting for democracy and sovereignty. Reality proved more complicated and considerably bloodier. Now I exist in a perpetual cycle of patching broken soldiers so they can return to be broken again. A cynical cog in a machine that consumes humans and outputs geopolitical statements, all while my hands remain permanently stained with blood that no one outside this forgotten corner of Europe seems to care about anymore. My journey to this makeshift trauma center began in March 2022, shortly after Russia launched its full-scale invasion. Like many Western military veterans watching the war unfold on television, I felt compelled to help. My skills as a combat medic seemed particularly valuable. Ukraine had plenty of motivated fighters but lacked experienced medical personnel. The Ukrainian embassy in London provided basic information, but the recruitment process was chaotic. Informal networks of veterans communicated through encrypted apps, sharing travel advice and contact information. Some were serious professionals like me. Others were adventure seekers or lost souls looking for purpose. A few were frankly delusional, weekend warriors imagining themselves as Rambo. Be prepared for disorganization, warned James, a former Royal Marine I connected with online. This isn't like deploying with NATO. They're building systems while fighting in existential war. He wasn't exaggerating. My arrival in Poland, crossing into Ukraine, and eventual incorporation into the International Legion was a study in bureaucratic confusion overlaid with genuine desperation. Medical credentials were hastily verified. Equipment was cobbled together from donations and captured Russian supplies. Training for non-medical personnel was abbreviated to the point of dangerous inadequacy. Despite the chaos, I found myself impressed by the Ukrainians' stubborn determination. They acknowledged problems honestly, but refused to be defeated by them. We fix it as we fight, explained Dr. Bondarenko, the Ukrainian surgeon who became my immediate superior. Perfect solutions can wait until after victory. My first casualty came 6 hours after arriving at the forward aid station near Kharkiv. A Ukrainian soldier with multiple shrapnel wounds from a Russian drone-dropped munition. As I worked to stabilize him, artillery began impacting nearby, the Russians targeting medical facilities with their customary disregard for Geneva Conventions. "Welcome to Ukraine," said Peterson, a Danish medic working alongside me, his voice flat with exhaustion, where the enemy gets targeting bonuses for hitting red crosses. That initial assignment lasted 3 weeks, treating more casualties than I had during 2 deployments to Afghanistan. The wounds were different, more high-velocity trauma from artillery and heavy weapons, rather than the IEDs and small arms of counterinsurgency operations. But the blood remained the same color, and the screams maintained their universal pitch regardless of nationality. After Kharkiv, I was transferred to the International Legion's newly formed medical section, a multinational assortment of healthcare professionals united by their desire to help Ukraine and increasingly by their shared trauma. Americans, Britons, Canadians, Poles, Balts, Scandinavians, former military medics, civilian paramedics, nurses, and doctors, all adapting their skills to the brutal realities of Europe's largest conventional war since 1945. By late summer 2022, our initial idealism had eroded under the constant pressure of mass casualty events. The cynicism that now defines our outlook developed as a psychological defense mechanism, a way to process the endless parade of broken young men without breaking ourselves. "You know what the definition of insanity is?" asked Miller, an American former 68W combat medic during a rare quiet moment. "Patching these kids up so they can go back and get hit by the same fucking artillery, hitting the same fucking trenches next week." I couldn't argue with his assessment. The war had stabilized into a grotesque pattern. Russian artillery pounding Ukrainian positions, Ukrainian infantry holding despite horrific casualties, counterattacks gaining minimal ground at maximum cost. And through it all, we medics collected the pieces, reassembled them when possible, and fed the survivors back into the meat grinder. "We're not healers," Miller continued, his voice hollow. "We're fucking mechanics, fixing broken parts so the machine can keep running, just with more blood and screaming than your average garage. His words have stayed with me through the following months of continuing casualties. A cynical, but accurate redefinition of our role in this war's economy of suffering. Second casualty, massive chest trauma, tension pneumothorax relieved in field, still critical, announces Jacobson as another stretcher arrives. This one is older, perhaps 40, with a wedding ring embedded in a swollen finger. A civilian, defending his hometown rather than a professional soldier. His chest bears the telltale occlusive dressing applied by a frontline medic, but blood bubbles around the edges with each labored breath. I move to him immediately, cutting away the field dressing to assess the damage. The shrapnel has torn through his right lung, causing massive internal bleeding. The improvised chest seal was a good field expedient, but insufficient for this level of trauma. Prepare for chest tube insertion, I order the Ukrainian nurse, assisting me, and get 2 more units of whole blood. Type? O negative available, she replies, already moving toward our precious refrigerator of blood products. Each unit represents a voluntary donation from Ukrainian civilians, their literal lifeblood, supporting the defense of their nation. As I work to place the chest tube, my mind calculates survival probabilities with the cold mathematics developed over months of similar cases. Severe thoracic trauma, significant blood loss, delayed evacuation time, approximately 30% chance of survival to the next level of care, perhaps 15% chance of eventual recovery. These mental calculations occur automatically now, an unconscious triage system that helps manage my emotional investment. The worse the odds, the more I distance myself. A survival mechanism developed through excessive exposure to mortality. The chest tube procedure succeeds, releasing accumulated blood and restoring lung function. His oxygen saturation improves, slightly, but he remains critical. We stabilize him as best we can and prepare him for immediate evacuation to the field hospital 50 kilometers west, where surgeons might improve his chances marginally. You've bought him time, says Dr. Bondarenko, observing my work with professional approval. Sometimes that's all we can do. As we load the casualties into transport vehicles, I catch myself wondering about the man's family. Does his wife know he's injured? Will she recognize the person who returns, assuming he survives? How many more husbands, fathers, sons must be sacrificed before this war concludes? The cynicism resurfaces immediately, smothering such questions. With harsh reality, it doesn't matter what I think or feel. The geopolitical forces driving this conflict care nothing for individual suffering. The artillery continues falling regardless of my philosophical ponderings. Wilson, take 30 minutes, orders Lieutenant Kovac, noting my exhaustion. Next casualties expected in 1 hour. Multiple traumatic amputations from anti-personnel mines. I nod acknowledgement and step outside the medical station, lighting a cigarette with blood-stained hands. Another habit acquired during this deployment, despite years of abstinence. The nicotine provides momentary clarity, a chemically induced pause in the relentless progression of trauma. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows across the village where we've established our aid station. It would be picturesque under different circumstances. Rolling agricultural land, ancient Orthodox church with glinting golden domes, traditional Ukrainian houses with decorative woodwork. Now it serves as a way station in the journey from frontline injury to definitive medical care, its beauty irrelevant to its function. Markham, an Australian nurse practitioner, joins me in my tobacco-fueled respite. Rough day, he observes unnecessarily, lighting his own cigarette. Same as yesterday, I reply. Same as tomorrow will be. Did you see the news? Western media's barely covering Ukraine anymore. New crisis somewhere else has their attention. We're yesterday's cause célèbre. The observation reinforces my cynicism. The initial flood of support, volunteers, equipment, outrage, has slowly diminished as the conflict grinds on without dramatic developments. The world's attention span for distant suffering rarely extends beyond a few news cycles. We'll still be here patching up the pieces long after the cameras leave, I note, exhaling smoke toward the artillery flashes visible on the eastern horizon. That's the reality of modern warfare. Public interest fades faster than the bloodstains. Markham, Nods agreement, his expression mirroring my disillusionment. Remember that American volunteer who came through last month? The one who kept talking about how he'd come to defend democracy and stand with Ukraine. The one who lasted 3 days at the front before developing medical issues and evacuating himself? That's the one. Just saw on social media he's giving paid speeches back home about his war experiences. Complete with book deal and documentary. We share a bitter laugh at the absurdity. The commodification of superficial involvement while we remain elbow deep in the actual consequences of war. The contrast between public narratives and ground-level reality has become another source of our collective cynicism. 5-minute warning, calls a medic from the doorway. Incoming casualties. Another cigarette extinguished, another round of hand washing that never fully removes the stains, another sequence of broken bodies requiring our attention. The cycle continues without regard for our diminishing psychological resources. By midnight, we've treated 17 casualties, 4 expectant, likely to die regardless of intervention, 9 urgent, 4 delayed. 3 died despite our efforts. The remainder have been stabilized and evacuated to higher-level care facilities further from the front. Our medical supplies are depleted, our energy exhausted, but the war continues generating its grim harvest. In the staff rest area, formerly a classroom still decorated with children's artwork, our multinational team decompresses through dark humor and shared cynicism. The psychological defense mechanisms of medical personnel in combat zones transcend language and nationality. Did you hear about the Ukrainian artillery unit that adopted a 3-legged dog? Asks Rodriguez, a Spanish emergency physician. They named him Lucky because he'd already had his encounter with Russian artillery. The joke earns tired chuckles, gallows humor that would horrify civilians, but sustains those immersed in daily trauma. Another aspect of war unchanged by time or technology. Management wants updated casualty statistics for headquarters, announces Lieutenant Kovac, interrupting our brief respite. Apparently, some NATO delegation needs impressive PowerPoint slides. Heaven forbid someone make decisions without a proper slide deck, I respond. The sarcasm automatic after months of bureaucratic absurdities layered atop medical horrors. Should we include color coding for optimal visual impact? Kovac's expression suggests he shares my cynicism but maintains professional restraint. Just the numbers, Wilson. Let the staff officers handle the presentation aesthetics. I compile the requested data, categorizing human suffering into neat statistical packages for consumption by distant decision makers. Types of wounds, treatment interventions, survival rates, evacuation times, the administrative quantification of agony in service to systems that perpetuate it. Later, attempting sleep on a cot that has witnessed countless similar efforts by exhausted medics, I reflect on my transformation since arriving in Ukraine. The idealistic combat medic who volunteered to support a nation defending itself has been replaced by a cynical trauma technician processing broken bodies with assembly line efficiency. The psychological cost of witnessing industrial scale, suffering without the capacity to fundamentally alter its production. My thoughts are interrupted by the predictable call. Wilson, vehicles approaching, multiple casualties, ETA 3 minutes. I rise automatically, splashing water on my face before heading to the treatment area. No need to check the time. The hour is irrelevant when the wounded arrive. Day and night blend together in the perpetual emergency of frontline medicine. These casualties come from a different unit, foreign volunteers like myself who've been holding defensive positions near Soledar. The International Legion component adds complexity to our treatment protocols. Different languages, varied training backgrounds, inconsistent equipment. What happened? I ask the conscious casualty, an American with a significant facial wound that has been hastily bandaged. Counter battery got our position, he replies, his Midwestern accent incongruous in eastern Ukraine. Russians have new drones spotting for their artillery, much more accurate than before. I nod while examining his wound. Shrapnel has torn through his cheek and fractured his mandible, but remarkably spared major vessels. Painful and disfiguring but survivable with proper intervention. You'll need maxillofacial surgery, I inform him, cleaning the wound carefully. We'll stabilize you here. then evacuation to Dnipro where they have the necessary specialists. Will I be able to return to my unit? He asks, revealing the priority common to many combatants regardless of nationality. The question triggers my cynicism. Another volunteer eager to return to the mechanism that damaged him. The perpetual cycle of violence and repair that defines this war and my role within it. That depends on how the surgery goes, I answer diplomatically, applying fresh dressings. But facial reconstruction takes time. His disappointment is visible despite his injury. The warrior ethos transcending rational self-preservation. Another psychological phenomenon unchanged since the first organized conflicts in human history. Throughout the night, we continue, receiving casualties in irregular waves, the tide of human damage ebbing and flowing with the rhythm of combat operations. By dawn, the floor requires another bleaching to remove blood that will never truly disappear. Just like my hands, during a brief lull, I step outside to watch the sunrise, a moment of natural beauty incongruent with the human destruction surrounding it. Artillery still thunders on the horizon, but birdsong has returned to the trees behind our facility. The juxtaposition would seem poetic if I retained any capacity for such sentimentality. Jakobsen joins me, offering coffee from our dwindling supply. "Another day in paradise," he comments with characteristic Nordic understatement. "Do you ever wonder what we're actually accomplishing here?" I ask, the question emerging unbidden from my exhaustion. Beyond patching holes in people who'll likely return with new ones? He considers this seriously, sipping his coffee before responding. "I think about it differently now than when I arrived. Less about some grand purpose, more about the individual in front of me. Maybe that's all we can do. Reduce suffering, where possible without delusions about ending it completely." His perspective offers a middle path between naive idealism and complete nihilism. A pragmatic approach to functioning in a situation where perfect solutions don't exist. Reducing suffering incrementally rather than eliminating it entirely. The philosophers can debate whether bandaging wounds changes the fundamental nature of war, he continues. Meanwhile, we'll keep bandaging because the alternative is worse. His quiet wisdom penetrates my cynical armor momentarily. Perhaps meaningful action remains possible even within a seemingly meaningless system. Perhaps reducing individual suffering matters regardless of its impact on the larger conflict. The moment of philosophical clarity ends abruptly as another ambulance approaches, horn blaring to announce urgent casualties. Jakobsen and I exchange knowing glances before returning to our positions, preparing for another cycle in this war without apparent end. I wash my hands again, the mechanical procedure preceding all medical interventions, watching as water runs red, then pink, then clear, but I know the blood remains, visible or not, just as this war remains, whether the world watches or turns away, just as suffering continues, whether philosophers justify it or condemn it. And I remain as well, caught between cynicism and duty, disillusionment and purpose. A combat medic with perpetually blood-stained hands in a war that the world is already forgetting. Captain Oleksandr Pavlenko, 34 years old, 2nd Tank Battalion, 3rd Separate Tank Brigade. Born in Kharkiv, Ukraine. The horizon disappears beneath a tide of Russian infantry. Hundreds of figures emerging from the morning mist, like something from a World War II newsreel. They advance in ragged lines across the open field, stumbling through shell craters and over their own dead from yesterday's failed assault. Behind them, BTR-82s and T-72s provide supporting fire, but remain distant, afraid of our javelins and artillery. My hands tighten around the controls of my T-64 BV tank as I calculate ranges and fields of fire. The Russians are employing their most primitive and terrible tactic, trading human lives for ground, using sheer mass to overcome our defenses. "Commander, I count at least 200 infantry in the first wave," reports Sergeant Polyakov, my gunner, his voice steady despite the odds. Another group assembling behind them, approximately 300 meters and closing, Load high explosive, I order, my voice echoing inside the cramped steel hull. Prepare to engage at 250 meters. The tank rocks slightly as Corporal Juravel, our loader, slams a 125mm round into the breech. The familiar mechanical sounds, the whine of the autoloader, the clank of the turret mechanisms, the electronic hum of our targeting systems, create a comforting symphony of destructive potential. This 30-ton machine, though obsolete by NATO standards, remains our shield against the human tide approaching our position. Target locked, confirms Polyakov. Permission to fire? Through my vision blocks, I watch the Russians advance. Most, wearing the distinctive white armbands of recently mobilized troops, poorly trained conscripts sent to die against our defensive line. Another human wave meant to exhaust our ammunition and resolve before their more experienced units exploit any breakthrough. The cruel mathematics of Russian doctrine hasn't changed since Stalingrad. Fire at will, I command, knowing each shell will kill dozens but won't stem the tide. All tanks in the company, engage targets at your discretion. Conserve ammunition but maintain suppression. The tank bucks violently as our main gun roars. The HE round impacts among the densest concentration of Russian infantry, throwing bodies and earth skyward in a terrible fountain. Before the dust settles, Juravel has loaded another round, and Polyakov has acquired a new target. Along our defensive line, 5 other Ukrainian tanks open fire, their main guns creating a thunderous chorus that momentarily drowns out the distant artillery. Yet, still they come, stumbling forward over their dead and wounded. A human wave counting on its mass to eventually overflow our defenses through sheer sacrifice. The signature of a military that values quantity over quality and treats its soldiers as expendable resources. Against this tide we stand as a steel wall, outnumbered but resolute. The defense of Ukraine depending on our ability to hold ground against an enemy willing to spend lives like ammunition. I had been a tank commander for 8 years before the full-scale invasion began on February 24, 2022. My unit, the 3rd, Separate Tank Brigade, had already seen combat in eastern Ukraine following Russia's initial aggression in 2014. We were well-trained, but equipped with aging Soviet-era T-64 tanks that belonged in museums rather than modern battlefields. When the missile strikes hit our base near Kharkiv in the war's opening hours, we were ready, having dispersed our vehicles following American intelligence warnings. While Russian saboteurs hunted our officers in the city, we established defensive positions along likely advance routes. They'll come with everything they have, predicted Colonel Bondarenko during our hasty deployment briefing. Their doctrine relies on overwhelming force, but they're expecting us to break after the first contact. Our resilience will be our greatest weapon. His words proved prophetic. The Russians advanced with confidence bordering on arrogance. Tank columns driving down highways without proper reconnaissance or flank security. Their initial attacks assumed Ukrainian resistance would collapse quickly, leading to fatal tactical errors. Our first engagement came on the war's 3rd day. My company was defending the eastern approach to Kharkiv when Russian armor appeared, a column of T-72B3s advancing in tight formation along the highway. Perfect targets. Remember your training, I told my crew over the intercom. We may be outnumbered, but we know this terrain. We've prepared for this moment for 8 years. We engaged from concealed positions, using the superior optics of our upgraded T-64 BVs to strike accurately at ranges exceeding the Russians' effective combat envelope. 3 enemy tanks destroyed in the initial exchange. The remainder scattered, their formation broken, their momentum lost. That early victory established a pattern that would define our resilience throughout the coming months, tactical skill and determination overcoming numerical disadvantage. What we lacked in modern equipment, we compensated for with superior crew coordination, better use of terrain, and absolute commitment to defending our homeland. As the war expanded, our brigade rotated through multiple hotspots: Kharkiv, Izium, northern Donbas. The tactical situations varied, but the fundamental challenge remained constant: withstanding Russian numerical superiority through resilience, adaptability, and maximizing our limited resources. By late summer 2022, the character of Russian attacks had evolved. Their initial confidence shattered by unexpected Ukrainian resistance. they resorted to more primitive tactics. Massive artillery preparatory fires followed by human wave assaults using poorly trained mobilized troops as cannon fodder. They're throwing bodies at us to deplete our ammunition before committing their professional units, explained Major Kovalenko during a battalion planning session. It's a tactic from their grandfather's war, but effective if we allow ourselves to be overwhelmed. Our response required both tactical skill and psychological resilience, the discipline to conserve ammunition while maintaining effective fires, the emotional fortitude to witness mass casualties without becoming paralyzed by the horror, the ability to stand firm against a human tide designed to break our resolve through sheer volume. That resilience was tested most severely during our deployment to defend the approaches to Bakhmut in November 2022. Second wave advancing. 300 meters, reports Polyakov as the first Russian assault falters under our combined fire. BTRs moving to support. Through vision blocks smudged with dust and gunpowder residue, I observed the battlefield transforming. The initial human wave broken into smaller groups seeking cover in shell craters and behind the bodies of their fallen comrades. But behind them, a second wave forms, even larger than the first. Their commanders committing more lives to the assault, calculating that eventually our ammunition or resolve must fail. Shift targeting to the BTRs, I order, identifying the greater threat. High explosive anti-tank rounds. The turret rotates smoothly as Polyakov acquires the new targets. These Russian BTR-82A armored personnel carriers represent a more significant danger than the infantry. Their 30mm autocannons can potentially penetrate our tank's thinner side armor if they achieve favorable firing positions. Target locked, confirms Polyakov. Range 820 meters. Fire! The heat round streaks toward the lead BTR, impacting with devastating effect. The vehicle erupts in flames, ammunition cooking off inside its hull. The second and third BTRs veer away, seeking cover behind terrain features while still providing supporting fire for their infantry. All tanks, focus on armor threats, I command over the company network. Infantry targets secondary priority. Conserve main gun ammunition and use coaxial machine guns for dispersed personnel. The battle evolves into a deadly rhythm, our tanks engaging the most threatening targets while infantry from our supporting mechanized units use anti-tank weapons against Russian vehicles and machine guns against their waves of personnel. Artillery coordinates relayed through our fire direction center bring precision strikes against Russian assembly areas. Drone operators identify command elements for targeted elimination. This combined arms defense represents Ukrainian adaptation to Russian human wave tactics, each system compensating for another's limitations, creating a lethal web that exacts maximum cost for minimal territorial gain. Our resilience manifested through tactical flexibility and integration rather than rigid doctrine. Russian infantry withdrawing, reports Lieutenant Shevchenko from our rightmost tank position. Appears to be regrouping for another attempt. The Vori. Temporary lull allows for quick maintenance and ammunition redistribution. Inside our tank, Zhuravel checks our remaining shells. 15 high explosive, 12 heat, 8 armor piercing. Sufficient for another engagement, but concerning. If Russian attacks continue at this intensity throughout the day. Status report from all stations, I request over the network. The responses paint a mixed picture. 2 tanks reporting mechanical issues but still operational. 1 with a wounded loader but functioning with reduced efficiency. All facing ammunition. Constraints. No catastrophic losses yet, but our defensive capacity diminishes with each assault. Battalion reports reinforcements and resupply estimated in 4 hours, announces our company executive officer over the command channel. We must hold until then with available resources. 4 hours. Likely 3 more human wave attacks before support arrives. The mathematics of resilience reduced to simple endurance, our determination versus their willingness to sacrifice lives. The radio crackles with an intercepted Russian transmission, their officers berating troops for insufficient aggression, threatening punishment for those who retreat. The contrast between their approach and ours couldn't be starker. We fight for our homeland with voluntary courage. They advance under threat of execution. Commander, drone feed shows 3rd assault forming, warns our intelligence liaison. Estimated 500 personnel with armor support. approaching from northeast axis. I study the tactical display showing enemy concentrations. The Russians are adapting, shifting their attack axis to target the juncture between our company and the adjacent mechanized infantry unit, looking for seams in our defense where their numerical advantage might finally overwhelm our integrated systems. Reposition tanks 3 and 4 to reinforce the northeastern sector, I order, adjusting our formation to counter their maneuver. All units adjust fields of fire accordingly. Prepare for assault within 15 minutes. As Polyakov maneuvers our tank to a new firing position, I take a moment to observe our defensive line. The camouflaged fighting positions, the concealed anti-tank teams, the Ukrainian flag flying defiantly from our command post. This small patch of Donbas soil, unremarkable before the war, now worth the lives of hundreds of Russian conscripts and the determined resistance of our outnumbered forces. The third Russian assault begins with a massive artillery barrage, Grad rockets and 152 mm shells churning the earth, transforming the landscape into a lunar surface of overlapping craters. The psychological component of their attack, designed to break our resolve before their infantry advances, we endure in the relative protection of our armored vehicles and prepared positions. The characteristic resilience of Ukrainian defenders who have learned to function despite artillery's constant presence. When their infantry emerges through the smoke and dust, the pattern appears familiar. Waves of men advancing across open ground, seeking to overwhelm through mass rather than maneuver. But subtle differences emerge as the attack develops. Better coordination between infantry and supporting fires. More effective use of smoke to conceal movement. The presence of assault engineers with specialized equipment for obstacle breaching. This group is different, I observe to Polyakov, as we engage the new threat. These aren't mobilized troops, likely Wagner or naval infantry. Better trained but still walking into our kill zone, he responds with grim satisfaction, placing accurate fire among their formations. The battle intensifies as these more competent troops employ fire and movement techniques, utilizing micro-terrain for cover while maintaining offensive momentum. Their supporting BTRs demonstrate better tactical positioning, seeking hull-down firing positions that minimize exposure while maximizing their weapons' effectiveness. Our defensive system adapts. Tank main guns focusing on armored threats, while coaxial machine guns suppress infantry advances. Mortars from supporting units place accurate fire on identified command elements. Anti-tank teams hold fire until optimal engagement ranges, preserving their limited missiles for critical threats. The human wave breaks against our defenses like water against stone, flowing around hard points, seeking weaknesses, occasionally gaining temporary footholds before being pushed back. The battlefield becomes a churning mass of advancing and retreating figures, burning vehicles and shell-torn earth. A scene from warfare's primitive past played out with modern weapons. Ammunition critical, reports Zhuravel after 2 hours of continuous engagement. 8 high explosive, 5 heat remaining. Similar reports echo across our network. All units approaching combat ineffectiveness through ammunition depletion rather than enemy action. The Russian strategy working as designed, testing our material resources rather than our courage. Battalion confirms reinforcements are 40 minutes out, announces the executive officer. They're pushing as fast as possible. 40 minutes, with depleted ammunition against an enemy still committing fresh troops. The mathematics grows increasingly unfavorable, yet giving ground remains unacceptable. This defensive line protects critical supply routes to Bakhmut, where Ukrainian forces are already fighting under siege conditions. All tanks implement ammunition conservation protocol, I order. Single shots, confirmed targets only. Use machine guns as primary weapons against infantry. We hold until reinforced. The discipline of our crews manifests in their response, switching to ammunition conservation while maintaining effective suppression. Each shot carefully placed for maximum effect rather than volume of fire. Our gunners tracking multiple targets but engaging only those presenting immediate threat. The Russians sense our reduced fire and press harder, committing their remaining reserves in a final push to overwhelm our position. What they fail to understand is that Ukrainian resilience transcends material constraints, our determination hardening as our ammunition depletes. Contact left. Infantry breaching the defensive line. calls Lieutenant Kravchenko from our leftmost position. They've penetrated between our tank and the infantry fighting positions. This represents the critical moment, the point where resilience must manifest as immediate action rather than stoic endurance. If this penetration expands, our entire defensive position becomes untenable. Tank 4, support infantry counterattack, I command. Tanks 2 and 3, continue suppression of main assault force. My tank will engage the breakthrough directly. Polyakov pivots our turret toward the new threat as I direct our driver to reposition. The breach is narrow but expanding. Approximately 30 Russian troops exploiting a seam created by an infantry fighting position destroyed by artillery. Last heat round loaded, announces Juravel as we maneuver to engage. Make it count, I tell Polyakov, who understands the gravity of our ammunition situation. Our tank crashes through undergrowth toward the penetration point, presenting our frontal armor to potential anti-tank threats, while bringing our weapons to bear on the Russian infantry. Polyakov's shot strikes perfectly, the heat round detonating among the densest concentration of enemy troops, immediately reducing their offensive momentum. Our coaxial machine gun continues the work as Ukrainian infantry counterattack, closing the breach through determined close-quarters combat. The penetration collapses under this combined pressure, the remaining Russian troops retreating in disarray. Breakthrough contained, reports Kravchenko. Defensive line restored. Across our sector, the Russian assault falters as their casualties mount beyond sustainable levels. Even their commander's willingness to sacrifice lives has limits, it seems. Their remaining forces begin a disorganized withdrawal, covered by smoke and supporting fires from their artillery. All units maintain vigilance, I caution over the network. This may be repositioning rather than retreat, but the attack has truly culminated. Their offensive capacity exhausted against our resilient defense. Drone reconnaissance confirms their withdrawal to assembly areas beyond our engagement range. The immediate threat passes, though artillery continues to harass our positions. As the promised reinforcements finally arrive, fresh infantry, ammunition resupply, and even 3 Western-supplied tanks to replace our damaged vehicles, I exit my tank to survey the battlefield. The human cost of Russian tactics lies evident across the churned earth. Hundreds of bodies in various postures of death, destroyed vehicles still smoldering, equipment abandoned during retreat. Colonel Bondarenko arrives with the reinforcement column, his expression somber as he assesses both our defensive position and the carnage beyond. Your company held against 3 major assaults, he notes with professional approval. The brigade commander sends his commendation. We're at 30% combat effectiveness, I report honestly. Ammunition nearly depleted, 2 tanks, with significant mechanical issues, multiple wounded requiring evacuation. He nods, understanding the cost of our resilience. Rest your men and refit. You'll rotate to reserve positions once the replacement company establishes their defensive line. Later, as fresh troops take responsibility for our sector, I gather with my tank commanders at our temporary command post, a partially collapsed farm building behind the defensive line. Despite exhaustion etched into their faces, I see the quiet pride of professional soldiers who have accomplished their mission against overwhelming odds. They threw everything they had at us, observes Lieutenant Shevchenko, sipping lukewarm coffee from a dented tin cup. 3 assault waves that would have broken through in the first hour if we'd been less prepared, or less stubborn, adds Kravchenko with a grim smile. Ukrainian stubbornness is our greatest weapon. His comment sparks tired laughter, the dark humor of soldiers who have faced death together and emerged victorious. But beneath the joke lies a fundamental truth about our defense of Ukraine. Against an enemy with superior numbers and material resources, our resilience represents our most effective countermeasure. The pattern would repeat across the coming months. Russian human wave attacks testing Ukrainian defensive positions, seeking to overwhelm through mass rather than maneuver. Our response remaining consistent: tactical skill, combined arms integration, and indomitable resilience. As we prepare to move to our reserve positions, I take a final moment to observe the battlefield from our defensive line. The hundreds of Russian dead testament to the futility of their human wave tactics against determined resistance. their commander's willingness to spend lives so freely ultimately failing against defenders fighting for their homeland with every resource at their disposal, including the intangible but decisive factor of national resilience. Tomorrow will bring another assault against another Ukrainian position, another human wave breaking against our defensive lines. But today, on this small patch of Donbas soil, our steel wall held firm against the tide. Major Anton Kovalchuk, 36 years old, Special Operations Center, Kraken, Main Directorate of Intelligence, HUR, born in Ivano-Frankivsk, Ukraine. The Russian officer's phone buzzes with a notification just as he steps outside the command post for a cigarette. Like most humans, his conditioning is Pavlovian, the notification sound triggering an immediate response regardless of operational security protocols. He glances around quickly before unlocking his screen, fingers trembling slightly as he opens the message. A video begins to play, his wife and children at their home in Krasnodar, a location he believes is safely distant from the Ukrainian conflict. His face pales as he realizes the implication. Someone is watching his family. The message text appears beneath the video. We can reach anyone, anywhere. Coordinates of your artillery units by 22 Bois or next video shows their bodies. From my position 300 meters away, I observe his reaction through a thermal scope. The psychological operation unfolding exactly as planned. He makes a hurried call, gesturing frantically, then returns inside the command post with newfound urgency. Our electronic warfare specialist intercepts the call instantly, the officer contacting his family, who confirm they're safe, but saw a drone outside their apartment 10 minutes ago. The seed of fear successfully planted. Target compromised, I whisper into my encrypted communication device. Psychological pressure applied, monitoring for reaction. My 4-person team has infiltrated 15 kilometers behind Russian lines in occupied Zaporizhzhia Oblast, not to conduct traditional sabotage or direct action, but to execute a complex hybrid operation combining intelligence collection, psychological, warfare, and advanced electronic manipulation. We operate in the gray zone between conventional warfare and digital conflict, exploiting human vulnerabilities rather than engaging military hardware. Command acknowledges, responds the calm voice of our controller at HUR headquarters in Kyiv. Maintain observation. Secondary phase initiates in 30 minutes. I settle deeper into my concealed position among the abandoned industrial ruins that provide perfect observation of the Russian headquarters. Modern special operations require patience above all, the ability to remain motionless for hours, simply watching and waiting while digital weapons do their work. The Russians have overwhelming conventional superiority in this sector, but remain vulnerable to the invisible threats they cannot grasp. Their 20th century military confronting 21st century hybrid warfare. Twilight approaches as I observe the Russian headquarters erupting into unusual activity, the psychological pressure producing its intended effect. Officers hurriedly moving between buildings, communications equipment being relocated, security patrols doubled, all predictable reactions to an implied threat against their families hundreds of kilometers away, all diverting resources from their primary mission. The invisible battlefield extends far beyond this physical space, a conflict fought simultaneously across digital networks, human psychology, and traditional terrain. Our mission exemplifies Ukraine's asymmetric approach. Unable to match Russian conventional power, we instead attack where they remain vulnerable, the hybrid domain where technology, information, and human factors intersect. The second phase begins with a precisely timed electronic attack that will push them further into our carefully constructed reality, behind Russian lines, but deep within their decision cycle. My journey into the shadow world of hybrid warfare began long before the full-scale invasion. I had joined Ukrainian military intelligence in 2015 after Russia's initial aggression in Donbas, bringing my background in cybersecurity and psychology to a newly formed unit specializing in information operations. Conventional warfare is only one dimension of modern conflict, explained General Budanov during my initial briefing at HUR headquarters. Russia has pioneered hybrid warfare against Ukraine since 2014, combining conventional forces with information manipulation, cyber attacks, and psychological operations. We must respond in kind, but with greater innovation. That philosophy guided the development of specialized units within Ukrainian intelligence services, teams combining traditional special operations capabilities with expertise in electronic warfare, cyber operations, and psychological manipulation. By 2022, we had created entirely new operational methodologies that transcended conventional military categories. When the full invasion began, these hybrid units initially focused on defensive operations, protecting critical information infrastructure, countering Russian propaganda narratives, and securing communications networks. But as the conflict evolved from Russia's failed blitzkrieg into protracted positional warfare, our mission shifted toward offensive applications behind enemy lines. We can't match their artillery or tank numbers, acknowledged Colonel Kovalenko, my immediate superior, during an operational planning session in June 2022. But we can infiltrate their decision-making cycle, create fear and uncertainty among their command elements, degrade their operational effectiveness without direct confrontation. The approach proved remarkably effective. Small teams, inserting into Russian-controlled territory not to destroy equipment or engage troops directly, but to conduct sophisticated psychological and information operations against key personnel. Exploiting the human factor that remains warfare's most vulnerable component, regardless of technological advancement. Our unit specialized in targeting Russian command structures, not through kinetic strikes, but through personalized psychological, pressure-leveraging digital vulnerabilities. Every Russian officer used smartphones despite security protocols prohibiting them. Every Russian commander had family members whose digital presence could be monitored and manipulated. Every communication system had exploitable weaknesses. By autumn 2022, these hybrid operations had evolved into a sophisticated methodology, a playbook combining physical infiltration, electronic warfare, psychological manipulation, and selective kinetic action when necessary. All designed to maximize disruptive effect while minimizing conventional military engagement. My team's current mission exemplifies this approach. 4 operators infiltrated behind Russian lines to compromise command effectiveness through targeted, psychological pressure rather than direct assault. A hybrid operation against the Russian 58th Combined Arms Army headquarters in occupied Zaporizhzhia. Second phase initiating, announces our electronic warfare specialist Mariana from her concealed position 200 meters south of my location. A former software engineer with an almost supernatural talent for signals intelligence, she represents the new breed of special operator, equally comfortable hacking networks or handling weapons. She activates the advanced electronic warfare system disguised within her seemingly standard equipment pack. The device begins emitting precisely calibrated signals designed to interfere with Russian encrypted communications while simultaneously injecting false traffic. Not simple jamming that would be immediately detected, but subtle degradation and manipulation that creates confusion without revealing its source. Electronic insertion successful, she confirms after 30 seconds. Their communication security officer is attempting countermeasures, implementing adaptive algorithms to bypass. Through my observation scope, I watch the Russian headquarters reaction unfold. Officers emerging from buildings with handheld radios, gesturing in frustration as communications degrade. Security patrols responding to false alerts appearing on their monitoring systems. Command vehicles repositioning as their electronic systems receive phantom targeting data, suggesting Ukrainian artillery has their coordinates. Cognitive chaos cascade achieving desired effect, I report to our controller. Estimate 40% degradation in command functionality. The elegance of hybrid warfare lies in its multiplier effect. Relatively small inputs generating disproportionately large disruptions by targeting critical nodes and exploiting psychological vulnerabilities. Our 4-person team effectively, neutralizing a headquarters staff of over 50 personnel without firing a single shot. Prepare for third phase, instructs our controller. OSINT team reports significant command confusion indicators on Russian military forums. Field units reporting contradictory orders. The third phase represents the most technologically sophisticated element of our operation: selective cyber intrusion into specific command systems. This aspect is handled primarily by our technical team in Kharkiv, with Mariana providing local electronic support through specialized equipment. Deploying targeted network exploitation package, she confirms. Accessing their unclassified command network through compromised personal devices. Modern military operations increasingly rely on digital systems for command and control, creating vulnerabilities despite security measures. Russian officers, like their counterparts worldwide, frequently circumvent cybersecurity protocols for convenience, using personal devices for operational communications, connecting to unsecured networks, downloading unauthorized applications, each violation creating access points for our technical specialists. Penetration achieved, Mariana reports after several tense minutes. Deploying data manipulation payload. Selective corruption of artillery target coordination files in progress. The digital weapon functions with surgical precision, not destroying systems that would trigger immediate security responses, but subtly altering fire mission data for Russian artillery units. Changing coordinates by 100-meter increments, sufficient to miss intended targets but not obviously incorrect during verification. Adjusting time on target instructions to desynchronize combined fires. Corrupting ammunition type designations to create logistics confusion. Through my scope, I observe the physical manifestation of this digital attack. Russian artillery coordination officers rushing between command vehicles with printed documents, attempting to reconcile contradictory fire mission data. The headquarters commander gesturing angrily as subordinates present conflicting information. Order deteriorating into controlled chaos. Data corruption confirmed effective. I update our controller. Battalion tactical group preparing fire mission with compromised coordinates. The ultimate objective materializes as Russian artillery begins firing inaccurate missions. Shells landing in empty fields or friendly positions rather than Ukrainian defensive lines. The entire fire support plan disintegrating due to corrupted data, creating cascading confusion across their command structure. All without the Russians understanding the true source of their dysfunction. Final phase authorized, confirms our controller. Selective kinetic action to reinforce psychological effect. This represents the most dangerous element of our mission, transitioning from invisible electronic operation to physical action. Our fourth team member, Sergeant Terrace, a sniper and demolition specialist, has positioned himself overlooking the headquarters communications array during the preceding phases. Target acquired, he reports calmly. Executing on your command. Execute, I confirm after ensuring team extraction routes remain viable. The precision shot strikes the headquarters' primary communications antenna, not completely destroying their capability, but creating additional degradation requiring immediate technical response. The calculated effect, forcing Russian communication specialists to expose themselves while repairing equipment, creating additional strain on already compromised command functions. Impact confirmed, reports Terrace. Technical team responding, as predicted, beginning extraction to Rally Point Alpha. The physical strike serves as psychological exclamation point to our hybrid operation, reinforcing the Russians' belief that they're under conventional attack rather than sophisticated manipulation. Their response follows predictable doctrine: increased security patrols, defensive repositioning, communication lockdowns, all further degrading their operational effectiveness. All elements initiate staggered withdrawal, I order, as darkness provides additional concealment. Maintain electronic monitoring during extraction. Our team separates according to predetermined routes, a standard special operations procedure, minimizing risk by avoiding concentration. Each operator follows carefully planned pathways through Russian-controlled territory toward Ukrainian lines 15 kilometers west. The physical extraction representing the most conventionally dangerous phase of our otherwise hybrid operation. My route takes me through abandoned industrial facilities offering both concealment and multiple avenues of escape if discovered. Modern special operations behind enemy lines rely on precision movement rather than direct confrontation, avoiding detection entirely rather than winning engagements. The Russian security forces vastly outnumber us, but remain focused on conventional threats rather than small teams operating in the shadows. Electronic sensors detect increased drone activity in your sector, warns Mariana over our encrypted communication system. Pattern suggests search operations rather than regular patrols. The Russians have realized something has compromised their headquarters' effectiveness, though they still don't understand the true nature of the attack. Their response remains conventionally predictable. Area security operations using unmanned systems to locate suspected Ukrainian infiltrators. Deploying counter-drone measures, I respond, activating a small electronic device that generates false signatures across multiple spectral bands. Another hybrid warfare tool, not destroying enemy systems, but manipulating their sensors to detect non-existent threats in the wrong locations. Modern battlefields operate across electromagnetic spectrum as much as physical terrain. Russian drones sweep the area sensing for heat signatures, radio emissions, and movement. Our countermeasures project false returns to their operators, creating ghost targets that draw security forces away from our actual extraction routes. Deception. Effective, confirms our controller, monitoring Russian communications. Security elements redirecting to false signatures 4 kilometers northeast. The hybrid approach continues protecting us even during physical extraction. Electronic. Deception multiplying the effectiveness of our small team against numerically superior forces. Technology and psychology combining to create asymmetric advantage. At the edge of Russian-controlled territory, we reach our exfiltration point, a seemingly abandoned farmhouse connected to our underground network of partisan supporters. The local cell has prepared civilian vehicles with hidden compartments for our equipment and specialized communications gear. All elements report status, I request over our secure network. Element 2 at Extraction Point Charlie, awaiting transportation, reports Mariana. Element 3, clear. Proceeding to secondary rally point, confirms our electronics specialist. Element 4 successfully extracted to Ukrainian lines, reports Taras, who had the shortest extraction route. Within hours, all team members have returned safely to Ukrainian-controlled territory, bringing valuable intelligence collected during the operation. More importantly, the effects of our hybrid action continue cascading through Russian command systems. Artillery firing inaccurate missions, communications remaining compromised, headquarters effectiveness degraded by at least 60%. According to Signals Intelligence, during debriefing at our forward operating base, Colonel Kovalenko reviews the mission results with evident satisfaction. Preliminary assessment shows their artillery effectiveness in the sector dropped 70% following your operation. Command confusion persisted for approximately 18 hours. At least 3 battalion tactical groups received contradictory movement orders. They still don't understand what happened, adds Major Shevchenko, our intelligence analyst. Their after-action assessment blames technical malfunctions and possible communications jamming, rather than coordinated hybrid operation. This represents the perfect outcome, significant degradation of enemy capability, without revealing our methodology. The Russians continuing to search for conventional explanations for unconventional effects. Their security measures focusing on the wrong threats while remaining vulnerable to our next hybrid operation. The psychological impact appears particularly effective, continues Shevchenko. Intercepted communications show battalion commanders questioning the competence of headquarters staff. Artillery units refusing fire missions without secondary Saidu confirmation. Command trust severely degraded. These secondary effects highlight the unique value of hybrid operations, the psychological and organizational damage extending far beyond immediate tactical impacts. Russian commanders now doubt their own systems, question their subordinates' reliability, and waste resources implementing security measures against perceived threats rather than actual methodologies. Your team will rest 48 hours before your next mission planning begins, concludes Colonel Kovalenko. We're developing similar operations against 3 additional command nodes in occupied territories. Later, alone in my quarters, I review technical details from the operation while considering potential improvements for future missions. The Russians will eventually adapt to our current hybrid tactics, requiring continuous evolution of our methodologies. The invisible battlefield changing more rapidly than conventional domains. This strange new warfare bears little resemblance to historical military operations. Small teams leveraging digital technologies, psychological manipulation, and information dominance rather than direct firepower. Yet it represents Ukraine's most effective asymmetric response to Russia's conventional advantages. Our inability to match their artillery numbers or tank formations, offset by superior adaptation to 21st century hybrid conflict. I prepare equipment for our next mission while monitoring intelligence reports from the target sector. The digital components requiring more maintenance than conventional weapons, battery systems for specialized electronic warfare equipment, custom firmware updates for exploitation tools, modified communication devices. The modern Special Operators Kit including more computing power than an entire military headquarters possessed during previous conflicts. Tomorrow we'll begin planning another infiltration into enemy territory, another hybrid operation combining physical presence with digital effects, another mission exploiting the seams between conventional military domains where Russian doctrine remains vulnerable, another demonstration that Ukraine's greatest strength lies not in matching Russian numbers, but in revolutionary approaches to modern conflict. We cannot defeat Russia's military machine through conventional force-on-force engagements, but through hybrid operations targeting their command systems, psychological vulnerabilities, and digital weaknesses. We create asymmetric effects beyond their ability to counter. The public sees Ukraine's resistance through viral videos of destroyed Russian tanks and intercepted drone footage, but the most significant operations occur invisibly. Hybrid teams infiltrating enemy decision cycles, manipulating information environments, and exploiting psychological vulnerabilities. The unseen battlefield where Ukraine's innovation counterbalances Russia's numerical superiority. I check my specialized equipment one final time before allowing myself a few hours of rest. The hybrid war continues tomorrow, invisible but devastating to an enemy still fighting the last century's conflict while we pioneer the next generation of warfare. Lieutenant Dmytro Kravchenko, 29 years old, Assault Group 4, Kraken Special Unit, born in Kharkiv, Ukraine. The Russian soldier doesn't see me watching him from inside the burnt-out apartment. He moves cautiously down, the debris-strewn street weapon raised, eyes darting between windows and doorways. From my position behind shattered concrete, I study him through a haze of dust and smoke that turns the world sepia-toned, like an old photograph from another war. His movements seem strangely mechanical, almost stop motion. Everything moves differently in this city now. Time stretches and contracts unpredictably. Sound arrives disconnected from its source. Light behaves according to unfamiliar physics. He's alone, whispers Terrace beside me, though I'm not entirely sure he's actually spoken aloud. Communication in this ruined urban landscape has become increasingly telepathic after weeks of house-to-house fighting. We understand each other through micro-expressions, subtle shifts in posture, the density of silence between breaths. The Russian soldier stops, seeming to sense something wrong. He turns slowly toward our position, though he couldn't possibly see us in the blackened hollow where a family's living room once existed. For 3 heartbeats, I'm convinced he's looking directly into my eyes across the impossible distance. Then a distant explosion draws his attention elsewhere. The moment breaks. I raise my suppressed AK-74, centering the holographic sight on his chest. The familiar pressure of the trigger against my finger feels like the only solid reality in this disintegrating cityscape. I exhale halfway and apply steady pressure. The weapon coughs softly, the sound absorbed by the hungry acoustics of destroyed buildings. The Russian drops immediately, a marionette with cut strings. No dramatic death, no final words, just the sudden transition from person to object. The transformation that defines this surreal urban battleground where the line between animate and inanimate blurs with each passing day. Buildings that seem to breathe, corpses that appear to move in peripheral vision, shadows that detach from their sources to dance independently across cratered walls. Clear to move, I whisper, though I'm increasingly uncertain whether I'm communicating with my team or the city itself. Kharkiv has become a living entity during these battles, a concrete labyrinth that shifts its passages while we navigate its broken interior. a wounded beast with whom we've developed a strange symbiosis. We defend it. It conceals us within its shattered body. We emerge from our hiding place, 5 operators moving like ghosts through the ruined skeleton of eastern Kharkiv, defending a city that increasingly exists in multiple, overlapping realities. The physical realm of tactical objectives and strategic significance. And something else. A dreamlike dimension where urban combat transforms perception until the boundaries between real and unreal dissolve completely. My descent into Kharkiv's concrete labyrinth began 3 weeks earlier, when Russian forces launched their new offensive against the city's eastern districts. Our Kraken unit, a special forces detachment under Ukrainian military intelligence, received orders to conduct urban defense operations in Saltivka district, preventing Russian breakthrough toward the city center. This will be different from conventional combat, warned Commander Alexei during our mission briefing. Urban warfare changes men. The city becomes both battlefield and psychological terrain. Some of you know this already from Mariupol or Bakhmut. I thought I understood his meaning, having experienced combat since 2014 in the initial Russian aggression. But Kharkiv's urban defense would prove unlike anything in modern warfare training manuals. The city's transformation into something beyond physical space became apparent during our first engagement. The Russian advance began with their standard protocol: artillery barrages followed by armored vehicles supporting infantry. Their doctrine unchanged since Soviet times, relying on overwhelming firepower rather than tactical nuance. Against open terrain, such approach proves devastating. But cities equalize asymmetric conflicts, turning technological advantages into liabilities. Our defense employed Kharkiv itself as primary weapon, pre-planned fields of fire covering major approaches, interconnected firing positions allowing mobility without exposure, pre-registered artillery targeting likely enemy assembly areas. The urban defender's methodology refined through bitter experience in Mariupol, Severodonetsk, and other contested Ukrainian cities. The first Russian infantry entered our sector at dawn, moving cautiously between destroyed apartment blocks. My team occupied the 3rd and 4th floors of a partially collapsed residential building, with clear observation of the main intersection. 8 of us against approximately 60 Russian troops, but with the critical advantage of intimate knowledge of our urban environment. Hold fire until they reach the kill zone, I instructed over our encrypted communications. Confirm targets before engaging. Through my scope, I watched their methodical but obviously inexperienced movement. These weren't elite troops, but recently mobilized soldiers with minimal urban combat training. Their formation too tight, their attention focused forward rather than upward where urban threats typically originate. Their officers gesturing obviously, creating priority targets. When they reached the pre-designated kill zone, an open area with limited cover between apartment buildings, our coordinated ambush erupted from multiple elevations and directions. The carefully orchestrated violence lasted less than 30 seconds, dropping more than 20 Russians before they comprehended what was happening. Their return fire sprayed wildly across building facades, striking everywhere except our actual positions. Confusion evident in their panicked radio transmissions that our electronic warfare specialist monitored and translated in real time. They're reporting ambush from all directions, he noted with grim satisfaction. Requesting immediate artillery support on their own position, we relocated immediately through pre-planned routes. Doorways cut between adjacent apartments, holes smashed between neighboring buildings, improvised bridges spanning narrow alleys. The three-dimensional mobility that defines effective urban combat. By the time Russian artillery responded to their infantry's desperate calls, we had vanished into Kharkiv's concrete embrace, leaving only bodies as evidence of our presence. That first engagement established the pattern for what followed: hit-and-run attacks exploiting superior knowledge of urban terrain. Ambushes followed by immediate relocation, allowing Russian troops to advance into prepared kill zones before striking from unexpected angles. The asymmetric calculus of urban defense, where a significantly smaller force can attrit larger units through superior tactical positioning. But something else developed during those initial days, something beyond tactical considerations. The city itself began changing, or perhaps our perception of it transformed through constant exposure to extreme violence in familiar settings. Everyday locations became surreal dreamscapes. Apartment buildings where civilians had lived normal lives just months earlier now resembled skeletal monuments from post-apocalyptic imagination. "Does that building look different to you?" asked Serhiy, our team's demolition specialist during our third day of operations. He gestured toward a high-rise that had been partially destroyed by Russian artillery. I studied it through binoculars, unsure what he meant, until I noticed the subtle movement. The structure appeared to be breathing, slowly, its concrete flanks expanding and contracting almost imperceptibly. "Just dust and smoke playing tricks," I replied, though unconvinced by my own explanation. "The city's alive now," Serhiy insisted quietly. "Changed by what's happening. You'll see it too eventually." I dismissed his comment as combat stress, but in coming days found myself increasingly aware of strange phenomena defying rational explanation. Acoustic anomalies where sounds originated from impossible locations, visual distortions where distances expanded or contracted unpredictably, temporal irregularities where minutes stretched into hours or compressed into seconds, the physical laws governing reality seeming increasingly negotiable within Kharkiv's embattled districts. Commander Oleksiy acknowledged these experiences during a rare gathering of our scattered teams in the underground command post. "Urban combat creates its own reality," he explained, his voice echoing strangely in the concrete chamber. "The psychological impact of fighting in places once filled with normal life. The dissonance between previous memories and current destruction. It affects perception in ways military training doesn't prepare you for." His explanation seemed rational, yet insufficient to describe what we were experiencing. Something more fundamental was occurring, a transformation of reality itself rather than merely our perception of it. The city becoming a conscious participant in its own defense, revealing hidden passageways that hadn't existed before, concealing us from enemy observation through impossible shadows, guiding us instinctively toward Russian vulnerabilities. By the second week, we moved through Kharkiv's ruined landscape like extensions of the city itself, navigating by intuition rather than maps, communicating through unspoken understanding, appearing and disappearing as if capable of passing through solid matter. Our effectiveness increasing as we surrendered to the dreamlike logic of urban combat. Russian casualties mounted while their tactical approach remained unchanged, still employing conventional methodologies against a battle space that had transcended conventional physics. Their drones observed empty streets moments before their patrols were annihilated by defenders who materialized from supposedly cleared buildings. Their thermal imaging detected heat signatures that led them into ambushes. Their communications intercepted phantom transmissions directing them toward prepared kill zones. "They're fighting in our city, but not in our reality," observed Taras after we eliminated a Russian squad without taking casualties. "They're still operating in normal space-time while we've adapted to whatever Kharkiv has become." His assessment captured something essential about our emerging advantage, not merely superior tactics, but a different relationship with the urban environment. We had stopped fighting in the city and started fighting with it, accepting its transformed nature and allowing it to guide our operations. The Russians remained outsiders attempting to impose conventional military logic on a space that no longer respected conventional laws. We moved silently through the skeleton of an apartment building that seems to reconfigure itself around us. Doorways, appearing where none existed moments before. Corridors extending beyond architectural possibility. Stairwells connecting floors in impossible configurations. My team no longer questions these phenomena, having accepted them as essential characteristics of Kharkiv's defense. "Russian platoon approaching from the east," reports Olena, our reconnaissance specialist. Her eyes have acquired a strange luminosity since the fighting began, as if reflecting a light source invisible to others. They're clearing buildings methodically. 2 already entered the structure across the street. I nod, processing this information while consulting my mental map of the area. A 3-dimensional rendering that bears increasingly little resemblance to pre-war reality, but accurately represents the city's current manifestation. We'll establish ambush position in the school building. It offers multiple engagement angles and extraction routes. The school has become one of our frequent operation centers, a 3-story structure whose interior geography shifts unpredictably but always advantageously for defenders. classrooms that expand to accommodate our teams, windows that provide perfect firing positions before disappearing when Russian counterfire begins, emergency exits materializing exactly when needed during tactical withdrawals. We reach it through a series of movements that would appear nonsensical to conventional military observers, passing through gaps barely large enough for human bodies, traversing spaces where buildings connect despite being physically separated, descending stairwells that lead impossibly to higher floors. The non-Euclidean geometry of combat-transformed Kharkiv has become our greatest defensive asset. Inside the school, we prepare our ambush with practiced efficiency. Weapon systems positioned to create overlapping fields of fire. Communication. Equipment established on frequencies that seem to bypass Russian jamming through means our radio operator cannot explain, but accepts pragmatically. Observation posts established in windows that adjust their perspectives to provide optimal views of Russian approaches. They're using different tactics today, notes Terrace, observing through a thermal scope. Smaller teams, better spacing, actually checking upper floors first. His observation confirms intelligence reports indicating Russian adaptation to their heavy urban combat losses, deployment of more experienced troops, improved tactical methodologies, better equipment, their learning curve finally accelerating after weeks of failing against our unconventional defense. They've brought in Spetsnaz elements, I conclude, noticing the distinctive movement patterns of professional special operators among the approaching Russians. These won't make the same mistakes as the mobilized troops. This development presents our first significant challenge since establishing symbiosis with Kharkiv's transformed reality. Russian special forces possess the adaptability and tactical awareness previously lacking in their conventional units. Their advanced training might allow them to perceive the city's altered nature and adjust accordingly. Spread wider. Establish secondary positions, I instruct, modifying our ambush structure. Maintain discipline. Engage only confirmed targets. These aren't conscripts. The approaching Russians move with evident professional competence, using proper urban combat techniques, maintaining appropriate spacing, checking all potential firing positions before advancing. Their methodical progress contrasts sharply with the clumsy tactics of previous units we've eliminated easily. As they near our position, I experience a moment of doubt, the surreal advantage we've enjoyed seeming suddenly tenuous against these, more capable opponents. But then Kharkiv itself responds, its concrete consciousness apparently recognizing the elevated threat. The school's interior reconfigures subtly, firing positions improving their angles, concealment becoming more comprehensive, extraction routes multiplying. They've entered the kill zone, announces Olena, her voice resonating with unusual harmonics that seem to emanate from the building itself. Primary targets identified. I give the signal to engage, and our coordinated fire erupts from positions the Russians clearly believed impossible. Their professional training manifests in immediate appropriate response, returning accurate fire, attempting coordinated withdrawal, maintaining communication discipline. But they're fighting against both our team and the city itself, a combination that transcends conventional combat parameters. The engagement lasts approximately 90 seconds, significantly longer than our typical ambushes against less capable units. When it concludes, 14 Russian special operators lie dead or wounded in the street while their survivors retreat in uncharacteristic disorder. Our position remains uncompromised, protected by Kharkiv's architectural impossibilities. They'll bring artillery next, predicts Serhiy, already preparing for immediate relocation. Standard response when their infantry fails. His assessment proves accurate minutes later, as the distinctive whistle of incoming shells announces Russian frustration expressed through indiscriminate firepower. But the city's surreal properties extend to artillery defense, shells impacting. With strange selectivity, destroying unoccupied structures while mysteriously failing to strike our positions despite accurate coordinates. Physical laws bending to protect those who've become part of Kharkiv's concrete consciousness. We withdraw through routes that defy mapmakers' logic, traversing distances that should require minutes in mere seconds, passing between buildings, separated by impassable gaps, descending into subway tunnels that shouldn't connect to our location, but somehow provide perfect extraction. The dream logic of urban defense operating at maximum effectiveness. Later, In the relative security of our underground command post, Commander Oleksiy reviews the day's operations with evident satisfaction. Russian casualties in the sector now exceed 500 with minimal losses on our side, he reports. Their advance has stalled completely. High Command is reallocating their forces to other sectors where they're encountering similar resistance. The other team leaders nod silently, each bearing the same altered appearance that I glimpse occasionally in reflective surfaces. Eyes containing impossible depths, skin textured like weathered concrete, movements synchronized with the subtle vibrations of the city above us. We've all transformed during these weeks of urban combat, becoming something neither fully human nor completely architectural, but existing in the borderland between. They can't defeat us here, states Oleksiy with absolute certainty. Not when the city itself has joined the defense. His statement captures the essential truth of our situation, Kharkiv defending itself through us as much as we defend it. The symbiotic relationship between urban space and its defenders, creating an impenetrable labyrinth that conventional military force cannot overcome regardless of numerical or technological superiority. When we return to our forward positions the following morning, Kharkiv greets us with familiar impossibilities. Buildings rearranged overnight, new passages opened through previously solid walls, acoustic anomalies that carry Russian communications directly to our listening posts. The concrete labyrinth, continuing its evolution in perfect harmony with our defensive requirements. I position my team in an apartment complex that offers expansive observation of Russian assembly areas. The structure seems to welcome us, interior walls shifting to create optimal firing positions, windows adjusting their perspectives to eliminate blind spots, stairwells reconfiguring to provide rapid vertical mobility, architecture as active, participant rather than passive battlefield. As Russian forces prepare their next assault, I find myself increasingly accepting the hallucinatory reality that has become our operational environment. The city's transformation from physical, space to conscious entity no longer seems disturbing, but instead represents warfare's natural evolution in urban environments. The concrete, steel, and glass absorbing human consciousness through prolonged exposure to extreme emotion, fear, determination, grief, resolve, until the boundary between defender and defended dissolves completely. We are Kharkiv now, and it is us. The collective consciousness of a city refusing external conquest through reality-altering resistance. The ghost streets and phantom buildings serving as our weapons against an enemy still operating according to conventional physical laws. Our defense transcending tactical considerations to become something metaphysical. The urban environment itself rejecting those who would destroy it. The Russians will continue their assaults with increasing desperation, unable to comprehend why conventional military doctrine fails so completely against our positions. They'll never understand that they're no longer fighting human defenders, but the collective consciousness of the city itself, manifested through those who've surrendered to its transformed reality. I check my weapon and prepare for the next engagement, comfortable within the hallucinatory landscape that has become more real to me than the world existing beyond Kharkiv's embattled districts. The concrete labyrinth protects its own. Sergeant Alexander Kovalenko, 29 years old, Reconnaissance and Sabotage Group, 3rd Separate Assault Brigade, born in Kyiv, Ukraine. The Russian communications tower stands like a skeletal finger against the pre-dawn sky, a prime target that will blind enemy units across 30 kilometers of front line when we destroy it. I adjust my night vision device, counting security personnel through the green haze. 4 perimeter guards, predictable patrol patterns, minimal electronic surveillance, laughably inadequate protection for infrastructure this valuable. But that's been the story of this war from day one. Russian military doctrine failing to adapt to the reality of Ukrainian special operations. Target confirmed. I whisper into my throat mic, the words forming visible vapor in the bitter cold. Security assessment indicates optimal strike window in 12 minutes, when patrol routes create blind spot on eastern approach. Acknowledged, responds Lieutenant Petrov, commanding our 8-person reconnaissance and sabotage team. Demolition package ready. Final confirmation to proceed? I scanned the surroundings once more, searching for indicators of ambush or surveillance. That might compromise our mission. Finding none, but unable to shake the familiar emptiness that has gradually replaced the patriotic fervor I felt during the war's early months. Another high-risk operation that will generate impressive drone footage for headquarters and social media, while changing almost nothing in the strategic balance. The hamster wheel of tactical successes within strategic stalemate. Proceed. With primary plan, I confirm regardless. Professional discipline overriding personal cynicism. Security element in position. Breach point confirmed clear. Sergeant Kozlov moves forward with the demolition package, precisely calculated. Charges designed to collapse the tower without causing extended collateral damage. His movements reflect the finely honed proficiency our brigade has developed through brutal experience. No wasted motion, no hesitation, just mechanical efficiency, born from countless similar operations. 2 years ago, I was an architectural, engineering student. Now I'm an expert in precisely calculating how to destroy infrastructure I once dreamed of building. The irony isn't lost on me, though gallows humor has long since replaced genuine amusement. Just another subtle transformation in a war that has remade us all into harder, colder versions of ourselves. The cynical evolution from civilian to soldier, to something beyond definition. My journey into disillusionment began with purest patriotism. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February 2022, I volunteered immediately like thousands of other Ukrainians. The existential threat to our nation erasing all previous life plans in favor of immediate defensive mobilization, my initial assignment was to the Territorial Defense Forces, hastily organized units composed primarily of civilians with minimal military experience. Our training lasted 3 days. Basic weapons familiarization, elementary tactics, rudimentary first aid. Then, immediate deployment to defensive positions around Kiev as Russian forces advanced from the north. The chaos of those early weeks permanently altered my perspective on warfare. The stark contrast between military theory and brutal reality becoming immediately apparent. Territorial defense units received contradictory orders, inadequate equipment, and minimal support while expected to hold against professional Russian forces. Only Moscow's catastrophic planning and logistical failures prevented complete disaster. This isn't the war they show in movies, observed my squad leader, a middle-aged construction foreman whose only military experience came from basic training 15 years earlier. No heroic charges or inspiring speeches, just confusion, fear, and hoping the Russians are more incompetent than we are. His assessment proved accurate, as the defense of Kiev unfolded through improvised resistance rather than coordinated operations. Civilians with hunting rifles manning checkpoints, Molotov cocktails prepared in elementary school basements, artillery firing from residential neighborhoods then relocating before counter-battery response. The desperate implementation of asymmetric warfare against an enemy that should have overwhelmed us within days. When Russian forces unexpectedly withdrew from northern Ukraine in April, reorganizing for their eastern offensive, the nature of our war transformed. The immediate existential threat receded, replaced by attritional conflict concentrated in Donbas. Units like mine transitioned from desperate defense to training for specialized offensive operations. My background in engineering and exceptional physical fitness scores resulted in transfer to the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade, an elite formation being developed specifically for reconnaissance and precision strike missions. Our training intensified dramatically under professional instructors, including NATO advisors providing expertise on modern battlefield operations. We're building something completely new, explained Major Denisenko during our initial briefing. Not special forces in the traditional sense, but specialized strike teams operating independently behind enemy lines. Your mission will be observation, intelligence collection, sabotage, and precision targeting for artillery and drone assets. The 6-week training regimen transformed us from motivated civilians into functional operators, capable of planning complex missions, navigating contested territory, identifying high-value targets, and executing strikes with minimal support. The brigade developing its own tactical identity, distinct from both Soviet-era Special Forces doctrine and Western models. My first operational deployment came in June 2022, a reconnaissance mission near Izium to identify Russian command posts and artillery positions. The four-person team inserted 15 kilometers behind enemy lines, establishing observation posts overlooking key road junctions. We remained undetected for 72 hours, documenting Russian movements and transmitting coordinates for HIMARS strikes that subsequently destroyed 3 ammunition depots. The mission's success generated immediate praise from higher command and transitioned to more complex operations. Sabotage of fuel depots, destruction of communications infrastructure, targeting of railway logistics, our brigade quickly establishing reputation for effectiveness in degrading Russian capabilities without requiring large-scale offensive operations. Yet despite tactical successes, strategic reality remained stubbornly unchanged. For every communications tower we destroyed, the Russians established alternative systems. For every ammunition depot we eliminated, 3 more arrived from Russian territory. For every command post we targeted, new officers replaced casualties and continued operations with minimal disruption. We are winning battles while failing to change the fundamental equation, noted Lieutenant Petrov during a rare moment of candor between operations. Their resources versus our ingenuity, mathematics favoring them in any extended conflict regardless of tactical brilliance. His observation crystallized the creeping cynicism developing among veteran operators. Not questioning Ukraine's cause or our commitment, but increasingly recognizing the limits of special operations against an enemy willing to absorb extraordinary casualties and equipment losses without altering strategic objectives. The Western media narrative portrayed brigades like ours as technological revolutionaries rendering Russian advantages irrelevant through superior tactics. The operational reality proved considerably more nuanced. Our success is meaningful but insufficient against an adversary with seemingly inexhaustible resources and willingness to sustain losses that would collapse Western military organizations. By winter 2022, my initial patriotic fervor had transformed into professional pragmatism tinged with cynical awareness of our limited strategic impact. Each successful operation celebrated in briefings and on social media, while the broader strategic situation remained fundamentally unchanged. The hamster wheel of tactical victories without strategic resolution. Charges placed, reports Sergeant Kozlov, interrupting my philosophical digression. Detonation system activated. 10-minute timer initiated. I acknowledge with a hand signal, already organizing our withdrawal through pre-planned routes designed to minimize detection risk. The sabotage portion of our operation proceeding with textbook precision despite the darkness and sub-zero temperatures. Another testament to the brigade's operational proficiency developed through constant repetition. All elements initiate. Extraction according to primary plan, orders Lieutenant Petrov over encrypted communications. Rendezvous at checkpoint 3 for accountability before proceeding to extraction point. Our 8-person team separates into 4 two-man elements, standard procedure reducing detection probability while creating multiple problems for any potential pursuers. My partner Ruslan and I take the northeastern route, moving through drainage culverts and abandoned industrial facilities that provide concealment from Russian surveillance assets. Another monument to Ukrainian victory, whispers Ruslan sardonically as we create distance from the target. I'm sure Western journalists will call this a devastating blow to Russian capabilities. His cynicism mirrors my own. Both of us recognizing the public relations value of our operations often exceeds their actual military impact. The visible sabotage achievements providing morale-boosting imagery while rarely altering fundamental battlefield dynamics. The drone footage will look impressive on headquarters briefings, I respond with matching cynicism. Another successful operation without strategic effect. We continue through the darkness, navigating by memorized terrain features rather than electronic devices that might trigger Russian detection systems. The extraction route covering 8 kilometers of enemy-controlled territory before reaching Ukrainian forward positions southeast of Bakhmut. The most dangerous phase of any sabotage operation occurring after the actual target destruction. Behind us, the communications tower collapses exactly as planned, our demolition charges severing Key structural supports to create controlled directional collapse away from civilian infrastructure. The precision destruction reflecting our brigade's philosophy of minimizing collateral damage, even in enemy territory. Observe primary target, reports our drone operator monitoring from relative safety 5 kilometers away. Successful destruction, confirmed. Russian quick reaction force deploying from northern compound. The Russians have become marginally more effective in their counter-sabotage responses, establishing rapid reaction units near high-value infrastructure and deploying electronic surveillance to detect Ukrainian operators. Their adaptation remains predictable, but represents improvement over their initial complacency. QRF approaching from expected direction, I confirm through thermal optics, showing Russian vehicles moving along the main road. Their pattern, unchanged from previous responses. This predictability represents another aspect of Russian operations generating cynicism among experienced Ukrainian operators, their inability to adapt basic tactical approaches despite repeated failures. The same reaction patterns, the same vulnerability to ambush, the same doctrinal rigidity regardless of demonstrated ineffectiveness. Our extraction continues without incident. The team utilizing pre-programmed dead spaces in Russian electronic, surveillance and exploiting terrain features shielding movement from observation posts. The countless previous operations creating institutional knowledge of exactly how to disappear within territory the Russians nominally control but cannot effectively secure. At Checkpoint 3, an abandoned farm building scheduled for future demolition. Our 4 elements reconsolidate for accountability and equipment check before the final movement to friendly lines. The team's mood reflects the contradictory psychological state common among brigade operators. Professional satisfaction in tactical execution, alongside cynical awareness of limited strategic impact. Another successful strike for the highlight. Real, comments Sergeant Kozlov, checking his equipment with methodical precision. I'm sure the Russians are reconsidering their entire Ukraine strategy now. The communications blackout will disrupt their operations for at least 72 hours, responds Lieutenant Petrov, maintaining command perspective despite sharing some of his team's cynicism. That creates opportunities for offensive operations in this sector. The lieutenant's assessment is technically accurate while practically questionable, the disruption meaningful but limited, the strategic impact minimal despite perfect tactical execution. The fundamental dynamic of our war unchanged by another infrastructure target eliminated from the battlefield. We complete final extraction without encountering Russian forces, crossing into Ukrainian-controlled territory near dawn through a drainage canal extensively used for similar operations. The brigade's forward operating base receives us with characteristic efficiency, immediate debriefing, equipment maintenance, medical check, hot food, and preparation for subsequent missions. Target successfully neutralized according to operational parameters, reports Lieutenant Petrov during the formal debriefing with battalion staff. Russian communications infrastructure in Grid Sector 14 compromised for estimated 72 to 96 hours. No casualties sustained. All equipment preserved. No evidence of compromise. The assessment generates appropriate professional acknowledgement rather than celebration. Another tactical success within a campaign comprising hundreds of similar operations across the expansive front. The cumulative effect significant but insufficient to fundamentally alter the strategic balance defined primarily by artillery superiority and manpower reserves. Later, in the relative privacy of our squad's bunker, the cynicism emerges more openly, veteran operators processing their experiences through dark humor and philosophical questioning that would be inappropriate in formal settings. Another glorious victory against Russian communications, observes Ruslan while cleaning his rifle. I'm sure Putin is reconsidering his life choices as we speak. The strategic genius of destroying infrastructure they'll replace within days, adds Kozlov, his voice heavy with ironic emphasis. Truly the decisive turning point in the conflict. I participate minimally in the gallows humor while recognizing its psychological utility. The cynicism functioning as emotional armor against the cognitive dissonance of high-risk operations with limited strategic impact. The brigade's operators maintaining professional excellence despite growing awareness of their tactical successes, insufficient effect on broader military outcomes. They keep building targets, We keep destroying them, I note, inspecting my equipment for the inevitable next mission. The definition of modern warfare: costly maintenance of stalemate until someone's economy or population breaks. The observation generates knowing nods rather than argument, the veteran operators having evolved beyond both naive patriotism and complete nihilism into functional cynicism that acknowledges both the necessity of our operations and their inherent limitations. The psychological middle ground where tactical excellence coexists with strategic skepticism. 2 days later, we receive orders for our next mission: reconnaissance of Russian defensive positions near Severodonetsk in preparation also for potential Ukrainian counteroffensive operations. Another high-risk insertion behind enemy lines to gather intelligence that may or may not translate into meaningful tactical advantage. I prepare my equipment with mechanical efficiency, checking weapons functionality, verifying communications, devices, securing specialized tools for obstacle breaching. The process reflecting neither heroic enthusiasm nor complete disillusionment, but the professional competence that defines our brigade's operational success regardless of strategic context. Ready for another episode of How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Tactical Stalemate? Asks Ruslan as we board the vehicles for deployment to our infiltration point. Ready to execute the mission regardless of whether it changes anything, I respond, embracing the contradiction rather than resolving it. Professional excellence in service of questionable strategy. The convoy departs toward another operation, where tactical success remains probable, while strategic impact remains doubtful. Where the 3rd Assault Brigade will demonstrate exceptional capabilities within a conflict increasingly defined by resource disparities rather than operational brilliance. Where cynicism provides emotional protection without preventing mission accomplishment. I check my weapon one final time while contemplating the strange duality of our situation. Fighting with absolute commitment for Ukraine, while maintaining rational skepticism about each operation's broader significance. The psychological complexity of modern warfare, where tactical excellence and strategic doubt coexist within the same individuals. The fundamental righteousness of Ukraine's defense remains beyond question, regardless of operational limitations or strategic constraints. Perhaps that certainty provides sufficient foundation for continued action, despite growing cynicism about tactical impacts. Professional excellence serving nation, even when individual operations seem insufficient against the mathematical realities of attritional warfare. Another day in Ukraine's premier sabotage brigade, where disillusionment and determination coexist. In functional balance, where cynicism provides emotional protection without compromising operational effectiveness. Where tactical brilliance continues regardless of strategic doubt. Captain Alexei Sokolov, 35 years old, Fire Direction Officer, Wagner Group Artillery Battalion, born in Rostov-on-Don, Russia. The MLRS battery erupts with mechanized fury, 12 BM-21 Grad launchers releasing 144 rockets in synchronized sequence. The sound physically assaults my body, not merely heard but felt as pressure waves hammering against my chest and eardrums, despite professional-grade hearing protection. The night transforms into unnatural day as rocket motors illuminate the landscape with harsh, flickering light. Through my binoculars, I track the projectiles arcing toward Ukrainian positions 8 kilometers southwest. Mathematics made manifest in high explosive delivery. Target package Alpha complete, I announce into my radio headset. All launchers functional, full release confirmed. Estimated impact in 47 seconds. My tablet displays the firing solution in clinical detail, coordinates, elevation, adjustments, meteorological considerations, trajectory calculations. Modern artillery operates at the intersection of physics and violence, transforming abstract numbers into precisely delivered destruction. The technology might evolve, but the fundamental equation remains unchanged. Accurate calculations plus reliable equipment equals predictable battlefield effects. Drone confirms rockets on trajectory, reports Senior Lieutenant Baranov from our UAV section. Ukrainian counter-battery radar active, Recommend immediate relocation to secondary firing position. I acknowledge his warning as the grad launchers already begin their rehearsed withdrawal. A choreographed dance of vehicles reversing from firing positions, crews working with mechanical efficiency born from constant repetition. The technical ballet of modern artillery operations, where survival depends equally on ballistic accuracy and positional mobility. 15 minutes in position maximum. The mathematical limit before Ukrainian counter-battery fire arrives with equivalent precision. Through the drone feed displayed on my second tablet, I watch as our rockets impact the targeted Ukrainian trench system. Precision violence delivered from beyond visual range. The thermal signatures of Ukrainian soldiers appear as bright silhouettes against darker backgrounds, their movements increasingly frantic as the barrage continues. The technical detachment of modern warfare allowing clinical observation of destruction without physical proximity to its consequences. This is artillery warfare in eastern Ukraine, a mathematical contest between opposing fire direction systems. Range calculations, meteorological adjustments, target acquisition, precision delivery, and immediate relocation. A technical profession requiring specialized knowledge and emotional distance. The modern battlefield reduced to data points, firing solutions, and mobility algorithms rather than direct confrontation. My integration into Wagner Group's artillery operations began 9 months earlier, following my separation from the Russian armed forces after 11 years of service. As a captain in the 8th Artillery Regiment with deployment experience in Syria, I possessed specialized skills valuable to Wagner's expansion of conventional capabilities beyond their initial focus on infantry operations. The recruitment process reflected Wagner's evolution from shadowy private military contractor to quasi-official extension of Russian military power. Formal interviews, professional assessment, structured contract negotiations. The organization had developed sophisticated human resources procedures that mirrored conventional military processes while offering significantly higher compensation and operational flexibility. We need artillery specialists who understand both technical requirements and tactical application, explained Colonel Mikhailov, the Wagner artillery commander conducting my interview. The Ukrainian conflict has transformed into an artillery contest that conventional Russian units are struggling to win despite equipment advantages. We require innovation beyond Ministry of Defense limitations. The financial incentives proved considerable, approximately 4 times my regular military salary plus combat bonuses and equipment allowances. Yet equally attractive was the promise of operational autonomy, the ability to implement tactical innovations without navigating bureaucratic approval processes that paralyzed conventional Russian artillery operations. My training transition lasted 3 weeks at a Wagner facility near Rostov. Familiarization with their command structure, communication protocols, equipment variations, and tactical doctrine. The process revealed an organization occupying an unusual position between conventional military and private entity, employing standard Russian equipment while developing distinct operational methodologies unconstrained by traditional military limitations. Forget half of what the Ministry of Defense taught you, advised Major Kuznetsov during orientation. Their artillery doctrine remains trapped in Soviet-era thinking. Massive barrages without precision, static firing positions, centralized command that prevents initiative. We're developing artillery operations appropriate for this specific conflict against an enemy with superior electronic warfare and counter-battery capabilities. The technical innovations became immediately apparent during my first deployment to the Bakhmut sector in October 2022. Wagner artillery units operated with fundamentally different tactical principles than their conventional Russian counterparts. Mobility received paramount emphasis, fire missions executed from temporary positions with strictly enforced 15-minute maximum exposure before mandatory relocation. Technical crews rehearsing rapid setup and breakdown until achieving efficiency impossible within regular Russian artillery units. Drone integration, transformed target acquisition. Each artillery battery assigned dedicated UAV teams providing real-time observation, fire correction, and battle damage assessment. The technical marriage of traditional artillery with modern surveillance, creating precision effects previously requiring specialized missile systems. Electronic warfare defenses incorporated counterintelligence principles, decoy transmitters, mimicking artillery communication signatures, false heat sources deploying before actual fire missions, specialized jamming equipment, disrupting Ukrainian counter-battery radar, the technological chess match extending beyond kinetic operations into electromagnetic spectrum manipulation. Decentralized command structures enabled tactical flexibility, battery commanders authorized to adjust mission parameters based on immediate battlefield conditions rather than awaiting approval through multiple headquarters layers. The organizational innovation creating responsiveness impossible within conventional Russian artillery frameworks. These methodological differences produced measurable results. Wagner artillery units maintained significantly higher operational tempos while suffering lower casualty rates than conventional Russian batteries in adjacent sectors. The technical adaptations demonstrating how organizational culture could overcome equipment limitations through innovative application. The Ukrainians have better Western artillery systems, observed Major Kuznetsov during a planning session. The M777 howitzers outrange our older systems. HIMARS provides precision we can't match with standard equipment, and their counter-battery radar is exceptionally effective. But we're adapting faster tactically while they're constrained by ammunition limitations and system maintenance requirements. His assessment highlighted the fundamental reality of artillery warfare in Ukraine, a contest between Western technological advantages and Russian numerical superiority, with operational methodology determining effectiveness beyond raw equipment capabilities. The mathematical equation balancing quality against quantity within time and space constraints. My responsibility as fire direction officer centered on maximizing this equation's output, ensuring optimal technical performance from our battery, despite equipment limitations and Ukrainian countermeasures. The position requiring both artillery expertise and continuous adaptation to evolving battlefield conditions. Secondary firing positions secured, reports Sergeant Vasilyev, our battery's position coordinator. All 12 launchers in prepared positions. Reload process at 70% completion. I acknowledge the update while focusing on my technical interface, the tablet displaying our next fire mission parameters as transmitted from Wagner headquarters. Target coordinates for Ukrainian command post identified through signal intelligence, meteorological data affecting ballistic oil, calculations timing requirements for synchronization with adjacent operations. Prepare fire mission Bravo, I order, transmitting targeting data to the individual launcher commanders. Registration shots authorized for initial ranging. Full battery fire mission on confirmation. Modern artillery operates through this technical chain. Intelligence identifying targets. Fire direction calculating solutions. Position elements preparing platforms. Crews executing with mechanical precision. The process incorporating human judgment while minimizing variables. Through technological standardization, the Wagner approach to artillery warfare differs from conventional Russian doctrine in its emphasis on precision effects rather than area saturation. Where regular Russian units might fire hundreds of rounds against general target areas, our methodology focuses on confirmed targets engaged with minimum necessary ammunition, the technical efficiency preserving limited resources while maximizing battlefield impact. Registration shots complete, reports the battery commander. Impact observed 27 meters southwest of intended target. Adjustment calculations in progress. Through the drone feed, I observed the impact of our ranging shots. 2 rockets striking near the suspected Ukrainian command post, housed in a partially destroyed school building. The thermal imaging shows personnel moving rapidly in response, confirming the target's operational status through their reaction patterns. Adjustment complete, I confirm after calculating the necessary corrections. Fire for effect authorized. Maximum 12 rockets per launcher to minimize exposure time. The launchers erupt again with controlled violence. The technical calculations translated into physical force directed precisely against identified targets. The multiple launch rocket systems representing the optimal balance between area effect and mobility requirements in this sector, where rapid displacement following fire missions remains essential for survival. Ukrainian counter-battery response has evolved into a sophisticated technical contest. Their Western-supplied systems typically responding within 8 to 14 minutes of detecting launch signatures. The mathematical time pressure defining modern artillery operations, where position duration directly correlates with survivability. Drone confirms effective impacts on target, reports Senior Lieutenant Baranov. Structure partially collapsed, multiple heat signatures eliminated, vehicle movement indicating evacuation of survivors. I monitor the time elapsed since initiating our fire mission, 11 minutes and 40 seconds. Still within our safety parameter, but approaching the danger threshold for Ukrainian counter-battery response. The technical discipline of artillery, warfare requiring continuous awareness of this survival equation. Mission complete, I announce over the command net. All units initiate immediate relocation to tertiary positions according to Movement Plan Charlie. The battery responds with practiced efficiency. Launchers already moving within 30 seconds of receiving the order. Support vehicles following pre-planned routes designed to minimize drone observation. Electronic warfare systems deploying. Countermeasures to mask our withdrawal signatures. The choreography reflecting thousands of repetitions across months of operations. As predicted, Ukrainian artillery response arrives 14 minutes after our initial launch. 152mm shells, impacting our now vacant firing position with precision that would have been devastating had we remained. The mathematical contest continuing with each side, demonstrating technical proficiency in this deadly calculus of time, space, and explosive effect. We establish our tertiary firing position 22 minutes later, a pre-surveyed location, with prepared fighting positions, camouflage materials, and calculated fields of fire. The methodical rotation between multiple prepared positions representing another Wagner innovation that conventional Russian artillery units struggled to implement due to logistical constraints and command rigidity. Battery reports ready for next fire mission, confirms Sergeant Vasilyev. All systems functional, ammunition at 65% capacity. I acknowledge while reviewing the target package for our next engagement. Ukrainian artillery. Positions identified through radio direction finding and drone reconnaissance. The counter-battery battle continues its cyclical pattern, each side attempting to eliminate the other's long-range strike capabilities through technical detection and precision response. The targeting tablet displays comprehensive data for mission planning, exact coordinates, elevation considerations, structure hardness requiring specific ammunition selection, optimal attack angles based on protective emplacements. Modern artillery transforming traditional gunnery into multi-dimensional technical problem-solving, incorporating dozens of variables simultaneously. Fire Mission Charlie preparing, I announce, transmitting the calculated firing solution to each launcher. Target is Ukrainian D-30 howitzer battery in hardened positions. Required effect is mobility kill through precision strikes on identified gun positions. The cycle repeats with mechanical precision. Launchers elevating to calculated angles. Crews loading rockets according to standardized procedures. Electronic systems confirming target coordinates through redundant verification. The human elements functioning as components within the larger technical system of modern artillery operations. Wagner's artillery methodology demonstrates how organizational adaptation can partially overcome technological disadvantages, while Ukrainian forces operate superior Western systems. Our revised tactics enable effective competition through mobility, precision targeting, and technical discipline. The mathematical equation balanced through operational innovation rather than equipment superiority. All launchers report ready, confirms the battery commander. Awaiting fire mission execution order. Execute fire mission Charlie. I, command, initiating another cycle of controlled destruction. The launchers perform their violent function with mechanical reliability. Rockets launching in sequenced salvos designed to ensure maximum target coverage while minimizing system strain. The technical perfection of modern artillery systems belying the devastating human consequences at the receiving end of these calculated trajectories. Through drone observation, I monitor the impacts against Ukrainian positions. The precision, violence registering as thermal blooms where high explosives transform potential energy into kinetic destruction. The technical distance allowing clinical assessment of battlefield effects without direct visual connection to human casualties, resulting from my calculations. Effective impacts confirmed on 4 of 6 identified howitzer positions, reports Senior Lieutenant Baranov. Ukrainian counter-battery radar active again. Electronic warfare detecting targeting signal directed toward our current position. Initiate. Immediate relocation, I order. The mathematical survival equation reasserting its primacy. Movement plan Delta to quaternary positions. The perpetual cycle continues. Fire, move, calculate, fire again. The technical rhythm of modern artillery warfare where survival depends on mobility and mathematics equally. Our battery maintaining this operational tempo continuously, executing multiple fire missions daily, while constantly relocating to avoid Ukrainian precision response. Later, during our nightly maintenance period at Wagner's forward operating base, I review performance metrics that transform violence into statistical analysis. Ammunition expenditure rates, target effect confirmations, system reliability assessments, crew performance evaluations. The technical professional's approach to warfare, where emotional distance enables continuous optimization through data-driven adjustment. Colonel Mikhailov visits our battery position during this assessment, his presence unusual enough to indicate significant organizational developments. Effective operations today, he notes, reviewing the drone footage of our target effects. Your battery maintains the highest efficiency rating in the battalion. Technical discipline and crew proficiency, I respond, attributing success to system performance rather than individual contribution. The mobility protocols you implemented have significantly reduced our vulnerability to Ukrainian counter-battery fire. He nods acknowledgement before revealing the purpose of his visit. The Ministry of Defense is implementing changes to Wagner's operational parameters. Beginning next week, our artillery assets will integrate more directly with conventional Russian forces rather than maintaining independent operational authority. The announcement represents a fundamental shift in Wagner's position within the Russian military structure. The organization's autonomy diminishing as conventional military. Leadership reasserts control. The technical implications for artillery operations immediately apparent. Reduced tactical flexibility. Increased bureaucratic constraints. Reversion to less effective conventional doctrine. Will our operational methodology be maintained? I ask, the technical professional concerned primarily with system effectiveness rather than organizational politics. Uncertain, he admits with uncharacteristic candidness. The competition between Wagner and conventional military leadership has created complications. Our artillery innovations have demonstrated superior effectiveness, but ministry doctrine remains resistant to external influence. His assessment confirms rumors circulating among Wagner personnel. The tension between conventional military hierarchy and Wagner's parallel command structure reaching breaking point. The technical success of our artillery methodology becoming subordinated to institutional power struggles beyond our operational control. I return to my equipment preparation with enhanced focus on technical details. The mathematics and mechanics of artillery remaining constant regardless of organizational turbulence. The firing solutions, meteorological calculations, and ballistic adjustments continuing to follow immutable physical laws even as command structures evolve. Tomorrow will bring more fire missions, more Ukrainian counter-battery responses, more mathematical calculations balancing lethality against survivability. The technical profession of artillery continuing its deadly work within whatever organizational framework emerges from current uncertainties. The fundamental equation unchanged. Accurate calculations plus reliable equipment equals predictable battlefield effects. This is modern artillery warfare, a technical discipline operating at the intersection of physics, technology, and violence. The Wagner approach demonstrating how methodological innovation can partially offset technological disadvantages through enhanced mobility, precision targeting, and decentralized execution. The mathematical contest continuing regardless of which organization controls the calculators and launchers. The orchestra of destruction playing on with interchangeable conductors but consistent instrumental principles. Major Konstantin Volkov, 41 years old, deep cover operations, 2nd Spetsnaz Brigade, GRU, born in Pskov, Russia. The Ukrainian territorial defense volunteers have no idea I've been watching them for 3 weeks. These civilians-turned-soldiers move with the unmistakable awkwardness of amateurs playing at war, carrying their weapons incorrectly, bunching together while walking, broadcasting their positions through careless radio chatter. Their checkpoint. Outside Kharkiv is a masterclass in vulnerability, sandbags arranged without proper coverage angles, fighting positions exposed to multiple lines of fire, sentries focused on their phones instead of approaches. Perfect targets for what I'm about to initiate. My tablet displays real-time intelligence from 6 sources simultaneously. Drone feeds from Russian military assets, security camera footage accessed through cyber penetration, intercepted Ukrainian, military communications, social media feeds from local civilians, geolocation data from compromised smartphones, and pattern-of-life analysis compiled by GRU algorithms. Modern hybrid warfare distilled into a single interface providing comprehensive battlefield awareness, while I remain completely invisible to my targets. Observation confirms target pattern consistency. I report through encrypted channels, my communication bouncing through 7 servers across 4 countries before reaching GRU headquarters in Moscow. Territorial defense rotation scheduled for 1,500 hours. Recommended execution at 14:45 during shift handover when security posture is weakest. Confirmed, responds my controller, voice digitally altered yet retaining its clinical precision. Strike package activated, electronic warfare assets standing by. Disinformation protocol initiated through appropriate channels. I verify my appearance one final time. Civilian clothes appropriately weathered, Ukrainian territorial defense patches and documents perfect in every detail, body language calibrated to match local behavioral patterns. The physical disguise merely supplementing the digital deception already underway. False communications transmitted by Russian electronic warfare units, misleading intelligence fed through compromised Ukrainian networks, social media reports of fictional Russian movements designed to draw attention away from the actual point of attack. The hybrid operation unfolds with synchronized precision. Conventional military actions, electronic warfare, cyber attacks, disinformation, and human intelligence converging on a single objective. The multi-domain implementation of modern conflict where physical violence represents merely one component within a comprehensive strategy. The invisible battlefield where I operate as both architect and participant. Commencing final approach, I confirm, activating the operation with calculated detachment. Expected effect in 3 minutes. The Ukrainian defenders remain oblivious to the orchestrated chaos already surrounding them, still believing they control their battle space, while I prepare to shatter that illusion completely. This is modern hybrid warfare, the strategic integration of all available means to achieve objectives while maintaining perfect deniability. The asymmetric application of violence, technology, and deception against which conventional military organizations remain fundamentally unprepared. My involvement in Ukraine's invisible front began long before the full-scale invasion. As a career GRU officer specializing in deep cover operations, I had operated extensively in Ukraine since 2014, establishing networks, identifying vulnerabilities, and preparing the informational battle space for eventual military action. We're conducting a new form of warfare, explained General Komarov during my initial briefing at GRU headquarters in 2015. Not merely gathering intelligence, but actively shaping the environment through integrated operations across multiple domains. Ukraine represents our primary laboratory for developing these capabilities. The approach transcended traditional espionage or special operations, combining military, technological, psychological, informational, and cybernetic elements into a coherent operational methodology. The hybrid warfare concept implemented through specialized units within GRU's structure. My particular assignment focused on penetrating and manipulating Ukraine's developing civilian defense structures, the volunteer organizations and territorial units forming in response to perceived Russian threats. These groups represented both obstacle and opportunity from Moscow's perspective. Potential resistance networks requiring neutralization, but also vulnerable to infiltration and exploitation. These civilian defense groups lack counterintelligence capabilities, noted Colonel Baranov, my direct superior. Their recruitment processes prioritize patriotic enthusiasm over security protocols. Their communications remain largely unencrypted. Their leadership lacks experience identifying penetration operations. They represent ideal targets for our hybrid approach. The subsequent years involved methodical implementation of this strategy, establishing cover identities within Ukrainian society, penetrating volunteer organizations, mapping social networks, identifying key influencers, and developing comprehensive targeting packages for eventual activation. The patient preparation of battlefield conditions years before conventional military forces would require such advantages. When the full invasion launched in February 2022, my role transformed from preparation to active operations, implementing the networks and knowledge developed during years of deep cover work. The mission parameters expanded beyond intelligence gathering to include direct action against Ukrainian defensive capabilities, particularly the territorial defense units rapidly forming nationwide. These civilian components represent a significant obstacle to our conventional military operations, General Komarov explained during secure video briefing. Their distributed organization and local knowledge enables resistance activities conventional forces struggle to counter. Your operational eye cells will target their leadership, communications, and effectiveness through integrated hybrid methods. The operational approach merged traditional special operations with modern technological capabilities, creating comprehensive effects through synchronized application across multiple domains. Physical operations included targeted elimination of key personnel, sabotage of critical infrastructure, and occasional direct action against territorial defense positions. The violence carefully calibrated to achieve specific effects while maintaining deniability through attribution to conventional military action or internal Ukrainian conflicts. Information operations manipulated territorial defense effectiveness through false orders, misleading intelligence, manufactured inter-organizational conflicts, and deliberate exposure of defensive positions to Russian military targeting. The digital battlefield equally important as physical confrontation in degrading Ukrainian resistance capabilities. Electronic warfare targeted the unsecured communications typical of civilian defense units, intercepting planning, jamming coordination channels during critical operations, and inserting false information causing territorial defense units to misallocate resources or expose positions to Russian fires. Psychological operations exploited the civilian backgrounds of territorial defenders, leveraging their families, security concerns, amplifying organizational tensions, and creating decision paralysis through targeted messaging that exploited their limited military experience and natural civilian risk aversion. Network penetration operations compromised the digital infrastructure these units increasingly relied upon, accessing planning documents through unsecured personal devices, mapping unit structures through social media analysis, and identifying vulnerabilities through systematic pattern-of-life monitoring. This multi-domain approach proved remarkably effective against organizations comprised primarily of civilians, with minimal security training and limited awareness of hybrid warfare concepts. Their patriotic motivation and local knowledge partially offset by fundamental vulnerability to integrated operations beyond their conceptual understanding. By April 2022, my operational cell had successfully compromised territorial defense networks across 3 districts in eastern Ukraine, not completely neutralizing their capabilities, but significantly degrading effectiveness through precisely targeted hybrid operations. The invisible battlefield producing tangible advantages for conventional Russian military forces without attribution to specialized GRU activities. Your operational metrics demonstrate significant impact, Colonel Baranov noted during encrypted assessment. Ukrainian territorial defense effectiveness reduced approximately 40% in your assigned sectors. Command confidence degraded through uncertainty about information security. Response capabilities fragmented through targeted elimination of key coordinators. The clinical evaluation reflected the mathematical approach to hybrid warfare, measuring success through quantifiable degradation rather than absolute destruction, creating sufficient dysfunction within Ukrainian defensive systems to prevent effective resistance without requiring complete neutralization of all components. Yet the operation revealed unexpected challenges as Ukrainian territorial defense evolved rapidly, adapting security protocols, implementing counterintelligence measures, improving communications discipline, and developing awareness of hybrid threats. Their learning curve accelerating through Western advisory support and bitter experience identifying Russian penetration attempts. They're adapting faster than anticipated, I reported after a territorial defense unit identified and eliminated 2 of my network assets. Implementing basic but effective counterintelligence screening, compartmentalizing sensitive information, developing operational security awareness previously absent. This evolution required corresponding adjustment to our hybrid approach, increased technical sophistication, more precise targeting, improved cover identities, and greater coordination between physical and informational operations. The invisible battlefield transforming from relatively straightforward penetration operations to increasingly complex counter-adaptation measures. The hybrid operation against the Kharkiv checkpoint demonstrates this evolved methodology, synchronized, effects across multiple domains creating vulnerabilities impossible through conventional military action alone. The integration of physical, electronic, informational, and psychological elements converging on a single territorial defense position. As I approach the checkpoint, Russian electronic warfare systems are already degrading Ukrainian military. Communications across the sector, not completely jamming, which would alert defenders to electronic attack, but introducing subtle distortions causing misunderstanding and delayed information transfer. The defenders receiving fragmented and occasionally contradictory instructions from higher headquarters. Simultaneously, Russian information operations have planted false intelligence through compromised Ukrainian channels suggesting Russian sabotage groups are active 20 kilometers north, drawing attention and resources away from the actual target area, and creating decision paralysis among territorial defense leadership, uncertain which reports to trust. Precision cyber penetration operation has compromised the personal smartphones of 3 checkpoint defenders, accessing their cameras and microphones to provide real-time intelligence while manipulating message notifications to distract attention at critical moments. The digital battlefield extending directly into the defenders' pockets without their awareness. All while conventional Russian military units conduct demonstrations elsewhere to fix Ukrainian attention away from my operational area. The physical component of hybrid warfare creating space for invisible effects that ultimately prove more damaging than direct kinetic action. Target area electronic preparation complete, confirms my support element through encrypted communication. Ukrainian command network experiencing 70% degradation. False reports successfully inserted through compromised channels. Conventional forces initiating diversionary operations on schedule. I acknowledge while maintaining my carefully constructed persona, a territorial defense coordinator from neighboring district arriving to discuss coordination measures. My documentation, uniform details, and background story withstand scrutiny from the minimally trained checkpoint personnel who have been systematically conditioned to expect this visit through previous information operations. Checkpoint in sight, I report, observing the position now visible 200 meters ahead. Continuing approach according to plan. The defenders react exactly as pattern analysis predicted. Perfunctory document check, minimal physical security measures, automatic trust extended to anyone in similar uniform. Their civilian backgrounds manifesting as fundamental security vulnerabilities despite basic military training. "Welcome, Lieutenant," greets the checkpoint commander, examining my perfectly forged credentials. "We received the coordination notification this morning, though communications have been spotty all day. Network problems throughout the sector," I respond sympathetically, building rapport through shared frustration. That's actually part of why I'm here. New communication protocols being implemented after possible Russian electronic penetration. The commander nods with evident relief at the explanation for communications difficulties. "We've been getting conflicting reports about Russian movement near Vovchansk, some frequencies completely unresponsive. Exactly the issues the new protocols should address," I confirm, removing a specialized device disguised as standard Ukrainian military tablet from my bag. "If I could just connect to your command radio to demonstrate the software update." The request exploits predictable human psychology, offering solution to immediate problem while building credibility through apparent technical expertise. The checkpoint commander accepts without hesitation, providing direct access to their command network exactly as operational planning anticipated. This will just take a moment to synchronize, I explain, while connecting the device that immediately begins uploading specialized malware into their communication system. The digital weapon designed to provide persistent access while creating exploitable vulnerabilities for subsequent Russian electronic warfare operations. Simultaneously, I conduct physical reconnaissance under perfect cover, noting defensive positions, weapons placements, personnel rotations, and security procedures while appearing to merely discuss coordination requirements. The territorial defenders unknowingly providing comprehensive intelligence to the very threat their checkpoint was established to intercept. Your position seems well established, I observe, gathering targeting data through conversation. How many personnel do you typically maintain during shift rotations? 12 during day shifts, 8 at night, the commander responds openly, plus the machine gun position on the eastern approach with 2 dedicated operators. This operational pattern continues 27 minutes, gathering intelligence, implanting electronic access tools, and psychologically conditioning defenders to accept subsequent deception measures. The hybrid approach maximizing effectiveness through sequenced operations across multiple domains simultaneously. I should coordinate with your incoming shift as well, I suggest, as rotation time approaches. The new protocols will require implementation by all personnel. The commander agrees without hesitation, further expanding my access and influence within their defensive system. The invisibility of hybrid warfare manifests in their complete acceptance of my constructed identity and narrative. As the shift change begins, territorial defenders exchanging positions with predictable confusion and minimal security consciousness. I transmit the final confirmation through encrypted channels. Target fully prepared. Electronic penetration complete. Physical reconnaissance confirmed optimal strike parameters. Executing extraction prior to effects delivery. Acknowledged, responds my controller. Strike package initiating in 5 minutes. Extraction route. Charlie confirmed clear. I conclude my interaction with practiced professionalism, thanking the commander, providing plausible explanation for departure, and establishing expectation for future contact that creates continued psychological access. The defenders completely unaware of the comprehensive compromise their position has experienced across physical, electronic, and informational domains. Departing the checkpoint, I maintain precise timing coordination with the broader operation unfolding across multiple domains. 500 meters from the position as Russian precision artillery, now possessing exact coordinates and detailed understanding of defensive arrangements through my reconnaissance, begins preparatory fires against identified hardpoints. Saboteur. Defenders' confusion manifests immediately through their compromised communications network. Contradictory orders, fragmented situation reports, inability to coordinate response. Their decision cycles systematically disrupted through electronic warfare leveraging access points established during my visit. From my observation position, I document the operation's effectiveness, the physical destruction caused by precision, fires, the organizational paralysis resulting from information manipulation, the inability to receive reinforcement due to deception operations targeting higher headquarters, the comprehensive effects of hybrid warfare demonstrating superiority over conventional military approaches against civilian defense structures, operation achieving primary objectives, I report clinically. Target neutralized through integrated effects, withdrawal proceeding according to parameters. The hybrid operation concludes with my extraction through pre-established routes, preservation of cover identity for future operations, and comprehensive documentation of effects for analytical refinement. The invisible battlefield temporarily visible through physical destruction before receding again into electronic, informational, and psychological domains where attribution becomes impossible. Later, at secured GRU forward operating location, Colonel Baranov reviews operational metrics with professional satisfaction. Effective implementation across all domains. Ukrainian territorial defense effectiveness in sector degraded approximately 60%. Command confidence severely compromised. 9 similar operations conducted simultaneously across eastern sectors with comparable results. The evaluation reflects hybrid warfare's fundamental nature, measuring success through integrated effects across multiple domains rather than simple physical destruction. The mathematical calculation of vulnerability creation and exploitation rather than traditional combat assessment. Territorial defense adaptation accelerating, I note, maintaining professional objectivity despite operational success. Implementing improved security protocols, receiving Western counter-hybrid warfare training, developing rudimentary but effective compartmentalization. Each operation faces increasing complexity. Baranov acknowledges this reality while reviewing plans for subsequent operations. Adaptation expected and incorporated into operational planning. Our methodology evolves simultaneously, maintaining relative advantage through superior integration across domains. This perpetual evolution defines modern hybrid warfare. Continuous adaptation by both implementing and targeted forces within compressed timeframes. The invisible battlefield shifting constantly as measures encounter countermeasures. Penetrations meet security improvements, and deception confronts enhanced awareness. Yet the fundamental asymmetry remains. Professional hybrid warfare specialists, operating against primarily civilian organizations, struggling to comprehend multi-domain conflict extending beyond physical violence into realms they barely recognize as battlefields. The inherent vulnerability of territorial defense units, formed from civilian volunteers against operations specifically designed to exploit their organizational and conceptual limitations. I prepare for my next assignment, another penetration. Operation against different territorial defense unit, using modified methodologies adapted to their specific vulnerabilities. The hybrid warfare cycle continuing its relentless progression as the invisible front remains the most consequential yet least understood battlefield in Ukraine's defense. The conventional war receives media coverage and public attention. Tanks, artillery, frontline movements documented extensively through traditional and social media. Yet the hybrid confrontation occurring simultaneously determines operational outcomes more decisively, while remaining largely invisible to outside observation. The shadow war where technological, psychological, and informational factors often outweigh physical combat in strategic significance. Tomorrow brings another operation, another carefully constructed identity, another penetration of vulnerable defensive systems, another synchronized application of effects across multiple domains. The continuous implementation of warfare's evolution beyond traditional boundaries into integrated hybrid approaches against which conventional defense remains fundamentally unprepared.